Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Yeah.
You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show till Mets do us part. John from Brooklyn, Gibby reps NJ. With the other team, I don't care what your friends say. Mets fans, we focus like a sensei. Listen to the podcast Monday, Wednesday. Made a couple bad plays, but we still won. Character, yup, we're gonna build some. Are you gonna check the pod? It's real fun. Just like Mookie, I will, son. So invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show.
Available now on all streaming platforms. If you love the New York Mets, check out Till Mets Do Us Part. Enough rapping. Let's get to yapping.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Til Mets Do Us Part, where we are live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single week on Wednesdays, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That is 2:30 p.m. out here on the West Coast where I reside. My name is John Saponaro. With me, as always, my co-host Matt Ibanez, holding things down back in New Jersey. And it seems like it is another week of busy, but not busy. Rumors, but nothing happening. But we have a lot to talk about here on Til Mets Do Us Part. We'll get into all of it. Plus, we've got a great guest joining us this week. But before we do any of that, Ibby, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good, John. Thank you for asking. And, the weather continues to be absolutely frigid and freezing over here in Jersey. We're making it through, making the best of it that we can. And, I was hoping that our Mets would provide some little bit more heat, a little bit more simmer to that hot stove. And yes, there are some rumors that we will cover at length, I'm sure, at some point between the two of us with our guest as well. And I'm sure the chat has plenty of thoughts on the latest that dropped today, which is very, convenient that, we go live today. So we got some fresh rumors to talk about, even though we think a lot of it is smoke with a lack of fire, but we will still cover it regardless. But other than that, it's Wednesday. The red light's on. We're going to have some fun as always. Shout out to the 100+ that are joining us already. If you haven't already, make sure you hit the like on the video, subscribe to the channel to join the chat. Big time ups to the 40+ new subscribers that have joined us ever since last week's show. Hopefully we can continue the good vibes and the subs keep rolling in, and we get to keep on meeting new friends and new Mets fans throughout the hour plus that we are here. But let's have some fun.
Couldn't have said it better myself, of course, live courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. Shout out to John Minconi. And I should say, Ibby, we didn't talk about it last week because we had a lot going on and there was a lot of moving parts and stuff for me with the wildfires and being under the weather and stuff like that. But congratulations goes out to Olivia and Tom. Olivia, who spent about a year or so editing the podcast, editing the show for the audio platform, Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, all of those places. She is currently no longer editing the podcast because she had her baby. She was beautiful. Pushing there at the very end, just desperate. I was talking to her. I was talking to Tom. They were desperate to have this baby. She was past her due date. They did. She is doing well. The baby is doing well. So beautiful. Welcome to the world, young Finn. And congratulations to Olivia. Congratulations to Tom. Hopefully we'll have Olivia back with the show at some point. But of course, right now she has much more important things on her plate. Shout out to the chat. Do a quick roll call here. We got Charlie, we got Ariel, Lopez, Mr. Nobody, Brad in the house, Jeff Cohen, who I think is only going to be here for a little bit. We've got Carlos Ortiz. We have Armand. We have Truman, Quinn, a lot of folks, a lot of familiar faces, Douglas Barnes, Carlos Ramos, trying to not miss anybody off the rip, Andre, D, so many folks here that are here with us each and every week. We got Pizza Sports Guy. We got Rocco in the house.
Rocco's here. What up, Rocco?
In the house, Queens Baseball Convention. Shout out to Media Goon himself, Keith Blacknick. So many folks here with us. But without further ado, let's bring on our guest, great Mets fan, fantastic stand-up comedian. We have Chris Scopo with us here today. Chris, how you doing, man? Welcome to the show.
Welcome
First
to the show,
time
Chris.
ever being a part of Til Mets Do Us part.
But I'm jacked up to be here because I can talk to actual Met fans. The dates I've been on have not liked it. They get upset with me. And I'm like, we're not signing Alonso. What's going on? And they're like, what are you talking about right now? And I'm like, you don't know me. So,
that could always be a bit of a red flag, man. You know, it's hard. I have dated women who are not into sports and women who are into sports, women who are into baseball, not into baseball. I'm also from New York City, but now I live out here in LA. So that was a little tricky for a while. But my girlfriend, who I've been with for almost 2 years now, she's from Queens. Stone's throw away from Shea Stadium.
Hey.
Stone's throw away from Citi Field. Die-hard Mets fan. So, yeah, it's a little easier.
Where's she from in Queens? I'm from Middle Village.
Like Jackson Heights?
Okay. I live in Astoria now, but I'm from Middle Village.
Okay, yeah. I was actually going to ask you where you're from. I don't think you and I ever overlapped. I don't think we've ever done a show together. I don't do stand-up anymore. Haven't in a while. But I think back when I was in New York, I don't think we ever crossed paths. I don't know if I'm mistaken on that. But
I mean, also, I meet people in stand-up. I'm like, how long have you been doing comedy in the city? They're like 15 years. I'm like, that's crazy. I've never met you in my life.
Yeah, it is the smallest, biggest community. I think people who are not a part of it don't understand that. Just stand up in general, but especially stand up in New York. It's kind of crazy to see like how big that community is, but it's a small world. It's very interesting ecosystem.
It's huge. It's massive in the city. I mean, I meet people constantly. I'm like, who are you? I do like being, I played baseball in college. So I am like, I'm on the higher echelon of comedians who are physically capable of throwing a baseball. I'm like the 98th percentile of like athletic comedian. So every time we play like a sport, I'm the dominant one. It's crazy.
Well, you know what? Let's dive right into this because I know like when we first started talking about having you on the show, you're like, listen, man, yeah, I'm a comic. Like, yeah, we can talk about that, but I just want to talk Mets baseball. Like you said in the open, you said you could talk about it for hours. You'll be here for as long as we need you to be here, which we appreciate. So let's just dive into this off season at large. Just get your opinions on it. I mean, obviously it's old news now, but you know, Mets make a big splash. Take Juan Soto away from the Yankees. I think you can make the case this is the most significant signing in the history of the franchise when you look at what they had to do to make this happen in terms of money, in terms of the ownership, in terms of the ownership's involvement and willingness to get it done. Taking him away from the Yankees is no small feat, all of that. So just your overarching view on what the offseason has been so far. Obviously not a lot since the Soto thing, but just kind of where things have been so far for you as a diehard Mets fan.
Well, first off, there was no better feeling than seeing those human meatballs in the Bronx cry. I mean, it was the greatest thing. And then they try to make like, oh, he's not that good. He's not that good at all. You're lucky to have him. He'll be DH in 4. I mean, who cares? I don't care. He's amazing. That was shocking. I mean, listen, I was in my head, I'm like, listen, no one leaves the Yankees. Like I've never in my lifetime, I've never seen a player leave the Yankees that they did not want to leave. So I was like, it was just wild to see him go to Queens. This is how you know the Mets are on a higher level, that like I have faith now in everybody. I'm like, we're gonna get whoever we want, we're gonna get them. If Cohen really wants them, we're gonna get him. I was walking my dog that night and I did scare him because I yelled in the middle of Astoria Park. So I love the Soto signing. It's been, you know, like this so far, but honestly, a lot of Met fans got to realize Stearns is cold-blooded. He is cold. If you're not producing, you're gone.
Yeah.
So we're going to lose a lot of players that we kind of love. That he's like, you know what? They're at a certain age. Goodbye. I'm not dealing with this anymore. I got young guys coming through the system. And I see that with obviously Alonso. He does not want Alonso. I don't care where anybody's. He does not want Alonso on this team. He's waiting for Vladdy. I've heard rumors they were offering Vladdy in like the beginning of by the winter meetings. I heard that from someone I know, and that's gonna cost prospects. That's gonna cost Jet Williams, Gilbert, maybe Clifford as well. So I still would do that, but I'd rather just take Alonso now. Let him have a huge opt out. Give him $40 million a year. Let him opt out. and next year sign Vladdy. But I have a feeling he doesn't want to opt out after next year because same thing is gonna happen again. With Vladdy's gonna be the big guy and you're gonna be the mediocre one. So I think 2 years is gonna be the opt out, and he'll DH if we get Vladdy.
Look, I mean, it's funny that you said that right into it. We have D in the comments saying, let's talk alternatives to Pete, I guess. And that has been the show for the last month. It's been what's going on with Pete, the rumors of the deals, then obviously Boras and Alonso's camp offer a deal to the Mets. We talked about that last week. When we had Manny Gomez, who covers the Mets for NJ Advance and Star Ledger and all that stuff, he was the first one who really said, not with any insider information, just kind of like, hey, Vlad Guerrero Jr. is going to be a free agent. Vlad Guerrero Jr. idolized what they had in Boston with Manny and David Ortiz. Juan Soto idolized that. How could you not look at that and romanticize that if you're a Mets fan, where you can try to recreate that for the next decade? And look,
he wants out. He wants out of Toronto. There's no way he wants.
I think everybody does.
Nobody wants that money.
Nobody
wants to stay in Toronto.
One of my best friends is a diehard Toronto Blue Jay fan. He's a comic, and I'm like, I don't know what they're doing. I'm like, they should break it down. Trade everybody.
Agreed.
They are not going in. They're not beating the Yankees. They're not beating the Orioles. Who
Red Sox are on the come up.
Red Sox have a good farm system too.
They do.
They're really good. They need to break it. They need to trade off Bo and Vladdy and get prospects. I don't know why they're trying to kind of like stick it together. Like, they're not signing him. He's going to get $600 million. I think at least $600 million.
I don't know that he'll get that much, but I could be wrong. But even still, it's going to cost the Mets or any team that's trying to acquire him, trying to sign him, maybe I would say $450 plus. I think that's going to be the range.
The age is the age. It used to be like, back in the day, he'll be 32, but he still has 10 years because he's steroids. Now there's no steroids anymore. So they're like, we're not doing that. But at 26, they'll give you 27. They'll give you the big contract. That's what everyone. Now you're going to see a lot of guys trying to not even. I think a lot of guys are not going to even go to college anymore who are on the borderline because they want that first contract at 25, 26.
Like the thing for me is like, I'm going to bring up Armand's comment real quick saying how a Toronto reporter was on Foul Territory last week saying how Vlad wants 450. The most interesting thing about this entire thing, especially when it comes to Vlad, is number one, the frame, the size, the type of player that he is, and what he's been over the last 3 or 4 years, how it's kind of fluctuated, which has also fluctuated his overall stats. But we've seen baseball go away from paying first baseman. We're seeing Pete struggle right now. Now, yes, the age definitely plays a factor, and Vlad hitting the market at an age where he's going to be 26, 27, still very young, a lot of prime left. It's going to be a very interesting thing to watch because for me, I have a very hard time seeing him, and this is going to sound strange because of what we're seeing when it comes to overall contracts right now, and to Chris's point when it comes to age. Like, I have a hard time seeing him break $300 million. I do because, but here we go. I have a hard time with it because I don't think teams want to invest that much when it comes to the position. We've seen everyone go away from paying first baseman. Now, this is why it's going to be so interesting to watch because is his name and is he going to have a year that he goes crazy where it warrants someone saying, you know what, screw it, I'll give $400 million. I don't care because of the age. I don't care about the position or whatever, because I think he's a player, even more so than Pete, that people can look at and say, this guy is destined to be a DH. Are they going to invest that much money? Look, I like Vlad. I've said on this show before, when Steve Cohen took over this team, when he was finally okay to be the new owner of the New York Mets, the first two things I did, I hit Google and I said, when is Juan Soto a free agent? That was the first thing I did. The second thing I did was, when is Vlad Jr. a free agent? Those, I swear to God, first two things I did because I wanted to know, when can these guys become New York Mets? So I have no problem going after Vlad or having Vlad on my team, but I question how baseball is going to react to paying a first baseman. Everyone talks about Boston as a shot for him going there. Boston doesn't want to pay anybody. So I don't know why everyone keeps on talking about them. They didn't want to give Mookie Betts, who's a better ball player than Vlad. They didn't want to give him $350.
That's where we look now.
And exactly.
Hugo was your big comeback.
Right, and now Verdugo's looking for a job. So it's going to be very interesting to watch unfold. I do think the Mets would be involved if things fall out with Pete, whether it's via trade now or when it comes to the offseason next year. But how much he gets is going to be a fascinating watch overall.
See, I think it's either Pete or it's Vlad. I don't see them signing Soto and being like, hey, now we're not going to get anybody. Cohen made promises. He's got to keep that up to Soto. So I think it's either going to be Pete this year or we're going to get Vlad in the trade because they have to do it if they don't sign Pete. You need that back behind Soto.
You do. It's funny you say that, Chris, because one of the things that I've been saying on this show since Soto is that what the Mets have accomplished in bringing him in, and it's part of the reason why I say it's the biggest franchise-altering signing that they have made in their history, is that they not only get to add a great player now to their core, but they have a guy who can be the leader of the next core. Soto is great now, but he's 26. The window that the Mets had to win was closing before it ever opened because you have Lindor, who's now 30. You have Diaz, who's 30. Senga, who's 30. Brandon Nimmo, who's 31, whatever he is. You have all these guys who are now, I'm not saying they're trending down because Lindor is still great, but you have this finite amount of time to win with these players. You add a great player who's in his prime right now in Soto, but he is also a transitionary player who you hope can be at the head of the next prime, which you hope includes Vientos and Alvarez and probably people who are not on the team yet, whether they're in the minors or they're a part of other organizations like Vlad Jr. So when you look at trying to pair them together over the next decade, that is very important. But you can't lose sight of the fact of what you just mentioned. The Mets signed Juan Soto. You cannot forget about 2025 after you make a move like that. And I don't care how unpredictable, unexpected, or whatever other words you want to use to describe it, it was. They're coming off of an NLCS, and fans, the players on that team, the ownership, the coaching, you owe it to all of those groups to continue to build off of that. So you can't just say, hey, Soto's better than Pete. He is, but you can't just say Soto's better than Pete. That's how we're going to replace Pete this year, and then we're going to go after Vlad next year. You can't do that anyway, but you especially can't do it while you're sitting here on January 15th with Santander still a free agent who might take a short-term deal, Bregman who's still a free agent who might take a shorter-term deal than he was looking for at first, and also Pete, who is now going to take a shorter-term deal. You can get one of these guys in here for 2025, and then you can do what you said at the open, which is turn around and try to sign Vlad Jr. anyway. Yeah. So they have to worry about the 2025, but they also have to worry about the bigger picture. And I think that's exactly what Stearns is doing. And that's why you don't see him rushing in.
Yeah, that's where I love Cohen and Stearns together, because Cohen has said in the beginning, we got to build the farm system. You need to sustain younger players with a Soto, because he's going to be a big chunk of that, of the salary cap. You need younger players to have less money to actually sustain the field. You can't have a $30 million player at every position. That's not going to happen. And he's smart enough to realize I got to get these young guys going. He wants a farm system that's just going to constantly produce players, because that is what's going to be sustained winning in the future. Like I keep telling Yankee fans this. I'm like, you guys haven't really brought players up recently. Back in the 90s, you were bringing players up left and right. That's where you were winning. That's where you were the great franchise. It's now buying players is not suitable for winning constantly.
You know, it isn't, but it kind of is. And here's where I'm going to push back on that a little bit. The Dodgers, you look at what they have built. They have a great farm system. They use their farm system to acquire other players. They also let players come up and play roles on their team. And this is something I've been preaching on this show. You're right. You can't have a $30 million plus player at every position, but you can have them at certain positions, and you can use your prospects to not necessarily be superstars. The example I kept using, and I know he's not on the team anymore, was Gavin Lux. Gavin Lux was a major prospect for them who never truly panned out to be a superstar. And who knows, maybe he goes on to blossom into something we haven't seen in Cincinnati. I doubt it. But the thing is, him being a very serviceable player who could play second base, play a little bit of shortstop, move around the infield, that's very valuable. That allows you to go out and say, you know what? I know we have Mookie, and I know we have Freeman, but now we're going to pay a boatload to Ohtani because we have this cost-controlled player who plays a role for us. And the guy that I keep pointing out that could be for the Mets is Luis Angel Acuna. He doesn't have to be his brother. He's not necessarily going to be his brother. He doesn't need to be a star. But if he can be a guy who can be a starter or be a guy who gets a lot of at-bats moving around the infield and the outfield and fill that kind of a role, it does allow you to spend in other places.
I'm on opposite of you. I think this is the perfect time to trade Luis Angel Acuna. His value has never been higher than it is right now. If you watched him play, his first 2 weeks were great. He was hitting everything. Yes. But his last 2 weeks were not good. He was swinging. They kind of figured him out a little bit. He was swinging and missing a lot of pitches. And yes, he didn't play as much, but his value is going to be the highest it is right now. And if you
I don't disagree.
His minor league stats are not the greatest.
Yes. No, they weren't.
And
it was wrong.
You have Jet Williams, who is a better prospect than him. You also have Ronnie Mauricio, who is a better prospect than him. So you have a plethora of middle infield guys. That's the problem. They have a plethora of middle infield guys. They need to get rid of somebody. Obviously, Jet Williams would be, if you trade him, he's for a Vladdy. But like Acuna, I think of Acuna, when you take a few weeks ago, we're talking about Acuna for Luis Castillo. I thought that would be the perfect guy to get in there because he can play so many positions for them. And they need young. Seattle needs young guys that are hitters that make no money, basically.
Yeah.
That's why I'm thinking now trade him at his highest value. I don't think he's going to be that good, and he is going to have the kind of the reality that he is not Ronald Acuna Jr. So he's right have that a little bit. So if he's like a 270 hitter, it's still people like, well, he's not his brother. He's not his brother. And
he's not hitting 40 homers, right?
And look,
just the division is him. It's like it's gonna be a lot, I think.
Yeah. Just to clarify, I'm using him as the example because he's the guy that we saw most recently at the major league level filling that kind of a role. But I agree with you. I've liked Ronnie Mauricio as a prospect better. I don't love Jet Williams, but I can't argue with the fact that he is a better prospect than Acuna. I'm just using Acuna as the example. Any of those guys would also fit the mold of what I'm talking about, of getting these guys up here who don't need to be stars, don't need to be the second coming of Willie Mays in order for the Mets to be a successful franchise. I think a lot of times when people latch onto these prospects, they think that, Ibby, you can't trade them at all. They're like, oh my God, like this guy and then this guy. Who needs Vlad? Because, if you're going to pay him and then the last 5 years of the contract, I don't care about the last 5 years of the contract. You can't worry about that. I just got into an argument with somebody on Twitter about this where, they're talking about the last years of a deal with Soto. And I think there's a comment actually right here. Yeah. This is from Edward Wall, who I believe is a new commenter, subscriber.
Welcome, Edward.
Welcome to the show, saying, please don't tell me you want 2 high-priced players locked in from age 35 to 40. That's ridiculous. It's not ridiculous when they're 25 now.
Yeah, we're getting them at 25. Exactly.
That's a decade from now. And look, the conversation I was having with the guy on Twitter was similar, where he was like, well, I want sustained winning. And the guy was in, like, I don't know, based on his picture, he's probably in his late 50s to mid 60s. And it's like, dude, don't you want to win one before you can talk about sustained winning? And I'm not saying throwing caution to the wind and just saying, fuck it, we just want to win one World Series. No, we all want sustainability, but maybe you can't have the sustainability until you win the first one.
I was born 6 months after the last championship, so I think it's me. So that's the whole thing. And I need to break this. I need to break this little code, the thing going on here. But also with the prospects, remember the big four was Mauricio, it was Beatty, it was Vientos, and it was Alvarez. Now the only one out of the four is Vientos, who we all thought was the fourth.
Right.
So you never know which of these prospects are gonna hit. And I think I don't want to give up that many prospects, but it's for the right guy, the right person. You want to get the prospects up for. I would love to get like a good like reliever. Like I think a few weeks ago with the Castillo deal, I was like, take on the money and then I would give him like a Acuna, and probably you have to attach. I mean, I think McNeil's gone anyway, but they want hitters. And I think McNeil still does have a lot of value in trade. You have to eat some of his salary, but he does play multiple positions and he is a former batting champion. Yeah. He can still hit. I think maybe if he gets out of New York, he might be better.
I think the point that you guys were talking about before when it comes to the prospects is that you want as many as you can get. You want to churn talent. It's not always about, to John's point before, everyone thinks that just because they're homegrown, and this is a fault of, I think, a lot of fan bases, but because we're Mets fans, we notice it a lot. Like, everyone's like, it's a homegrown Met. It's a homegrown. This is ours. It's this.
Everyone does.
It's like
Every team does that. Yeah.
Every team does it. It's like this guy's ours. This is what it means to be, enter team name here. It's like, I understand that to an extent, and I get why people have the attachment to Pete and what he's done to this point. But it's also about being smart. And I said this point to John before off air, when it comes to this whole idea of Pete and Vlad and making trades and things like that. Like, we've seen Pete when he burst onto the scene as a rookie. He hits 50-plus home runs, and he's provided everything he has right now, and now he's in his 30s. The whole point of what I view Stearns might be doing when it comes to playing hardball with Pete and trying to get things at their price point, is if I have an opportunity to get something where it resets my clock as a team, if I could get Vlad at 26, 27, I'm basically restarting the clock of when I had Pete when he first came up, burst on the scene, and puts up those stats. And you think that Vlad could do similar things. Yes, I understand Vlad did this in Toronto versus Pete proving it in New York. Don't you want Pete for the 3 years as opposed to Vlad for potentially 8 to 10 years? But the whole thing is, if I can reset said clock, that opens my window for a longer period of time, and it allows me to build properly with a prime Juan Soto and a back-end prime of Francisco Lindor, and then seeing what you still have in Brandon Nimmo, and hopefully the continued success and growth of players like Alvarez and Vientos and whatever else you might have. But even if you're making a trade for one of these guys, if you're trading for Vlad, if you're trading for Luis Castillo, and you have an opportunity, you sell them. You get the talent that you can get, and then you can continue building. I understand what Stearns wants to do, and to Chris's point before, you want to have these guys. You do, because this is how you win. The Dodgers, we can talk about the Dodgers all we want. The Dodger model, everyone talks about the Dodgers this, Dodgers that.
They did trade a lot of prospects.
They've traded a bunch of prospects to get said players. And what happens? They just keep on churning.
They still have a top five partner system.
You're trying to create a wheel. That's what you're trying to do. So no matter what, the second you get one guy, it's the next guy. Now you get Elian Pena in the international draft. Now he's part of the wheel. You want to keep on getting guys so that you can keep on bringing in talent. That's what creates sustainability. Just because you have a prospect doesn't mean it's going to be that lottery ticket is going to be for you on your team. That lottery ticket might be giving it to someone else and then cashing in and getting someone else to help you in a given area. So there's a lot when it comes to all that stuff. Yeah.
I think also Cohen is smart. Cohen is also not young. He's like 66, 67.
I've said that a lot, Chris. It's funny. I'm not trying to write anybody's obituary.
He's not Joe Steinberg in his 40s.
Listen, at the end of Juan Soto's contract, Steve Cohen's going to be 81 years old. He doesn't care.
I think he's trying to set this up for his family. This is like a family thing.
Yes,
100%.
I got to get the proper people in. He's got Stearns. He has the proper guy in line to keep this churning for his family, keep it moving for his
young
family.
manager in Mendoza.
Yes. Mm-hmm. He's if you ever listen to Cohen, he hates bad deals. He says, "I hate a bad deal," and he's not shy about cutting losses. So he knows what to do. He knows I can just move from the financial world to this world and just focus on bad. Alonso, 5 years is a bad deal. It's not a good deal. So you got to realize that the pitching when they wanted 8, if Burns wanted 8 years, it's not a good deal.
No.
So he knows what to do. He knows I got to be smart here and do it this way.
I'm going to jump into the comments really quick because when we have a guest on, sometimes we not ignore them, but it's a little harder to get to some of them. So I do want to hit on a few of them really quick. First, we got David Burnett checking in saying, hi, Jeff, to Jeff Cohen. Hi, Matt. Hi, John. He said earlier, finally watching live, usually watch a day or two later. So welcome to the live show.
Good to see you, David.
Then we've got a question from one of our great viewers and listeners, Patty in NYC, PB. She's saying, I think I've seen Chris somewhere, maybe QED or Grove 34. Probably, right, Chris?
In there, yep, both of them. What's up? Are you single? I need a Met fan girlfriend. It's me and my dog Seaver over here. We're chilling.
Good name for a dog.
Good.
Great name for a dog.
I'm such a loser. When the Mets were in the playoffs, I was scouting the pitchers that we were facing. I was watching their games before and scouting them. The Mets were going to ask me for my scouting report for the next for the game. Yeah. I was like Yamamoto, if his splitter's up, we got him. I'm
going to get into these two comments together. I'm going to give my thought on it, and then I'm going to kind of bounce it around the room with you two guys, because I think this is the misconception that some of the folks, and all three of us don't agree exactly on how this needs to be built going forward, but we do understand the vision, and I think we agree with the bigger picture. So that's why I think this is good food for thought. So first we have Edward saying, so mortgage the future for players now is what you're saying. I don't think that's a good idea when you can get good players for the short term. I just want to say that is not what I'm saying. Juan Soto and Vlad Guerrero Jr. at 25 and 26 years old is not mortgaging the future at all. It is guaranteeing the future. It is the opposite of mortgaging it. And Andrew says, I wouldn't trade Jet, Acuna, Gilbert, or Mauricio, but it does kill me seeing Mets fans wanting to empty the farm for a rental and then complain we have no prospects. First of all,
drive them to Toronto. I would drive them to Toronto.
I would drive them from Toronto, from Los Angeles to make that happen.
Whatever they want for Vlad Guerrero Jr.
Listen, these are good prospects. They're not all going to pan out. That's how prospects work.
Prospects. You don't know.
It's always a gamble, no matter what. They're not always going to hit.
That's not a gamble. He's not a gamble. I'm sorry. That's not a gamble.
He's a known quantity. Yeah. And we've all mentioned some of the guys. You mentioned the four with Beatty, Mauricio, Vientos, and Alvarez. You can now look at some of these younger prospects with Acuna, Williams, and Gilbert, and all these folks. I've said it on this show before, Ibby, and it reigns true. Prospects don't pan out, most of them. When you start to see guys panning out in your system over a short period of time, it actually decreases the likelihood that other guys of that same era are going to pan out. So if Vientos is truly what we saw last year, which is now a superstar level hitter, that's what he showed to be in a short sample size. If he's that, and Alvarez is somewhere between what he did his first year and his second year, which was a down year, then the odds of these four guys listed being as good as those two are almost zero.
And we have to be careful.
One of these guys hits. If one of those four that was on the screen just hit, then it's great. It's great.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that a lot of Mets fans don't realize, we've talked about this on the show weeks ago when I brought up the overall breakdown of Mets hitters within our system. This is where this team has to get better when it comes to developing, hitting. Like we've seen him with Vientos so far, which is great. Hopefully it's sustainable and it continues. But for the most part, when it comes to churning hitters, it's kind of been few and far when it comes to this team. So the fact that a lot of fans are attaching themselves to guys in hopes that, can't get rid of this guy because Baseball America says that they're number 56 and this guy's this. There's no guarantee. No matter what, it always comes down to the actual deal. What am I giving up said player for? And I caution people when they say, you got to give up, you got to empty the entire farm if you were to go after a Vlad. It's always dependent on who else is buying in on the same thing that you are. And I've said this before. It's why I broke down exactly what was going to happen with the Mets when it came to Garrett Crochet and how I said he was going to Boston, which ended up happening. So if the Mets quantity is better than the Mets quality right now, in my opinion, when it comes to the farm. So if they have an opportunity and no one else is selling, then their quantity could help them in this situation. But if someone else tries to squeeze in and says, hey, we want them and they have better quality, well, then that puts the Mets at a disadvantage and they would have to give more. I said in our chat earlier before, I said, if the Mets were to do this, it would be similar to what happened when they got Francisco Lindor. I spoke on this years ago when it happened. And I said, if they're, the Mets aren't going to have to give up that much to attain Lindor because 1 year left, team's not going to pay him. They eventually have to bend the knee, if you will, to get whatever they can for him. Now, Toronto has the money, but I think in order for Vlad to stay, he turns down the money that they offered him because he knows that if I'm going to stay here and be a part of a rebuild, you better give me a lot more money for me to stay and be a part of this. Otherwise, I'm going elsewhere. So when people say he turned down $350, he's going to want $450. I think that to me, at least, that's more of that's a Toronto tax. Money's different there. You want me to stay there. You got to give me X amount of money to do so. So I don't think it's going to be, the same in that sense. But to bring it all back, it all comes down to the actual deal itself. If the Mets and Toronto were actually talking and they were the ones that were really pushing and nobody else was, the Mets quantity could win out. But at the same time, they wouldn't have to give up as much as people think they would.
No, well, first of all, with the Mets prospects, like I look at the Mets farm system, like either before Jeff Wilpon and after Jeff Wilpon. So like I don't like everything is way better after Jeff Wilpon. Everyone before that was just horrible.
Life in general is better after Jeff Wilpon.
Yeah, it's like ACBC. It's before Christ, after Christ. Because it's such a different world. Like we're also. I look at the Mets like they're 4 years old. They're 5 years old right now. They're 5.
I agree.
That's how much they've changed. I've heard rumors of like how they were just so horrible. They had no idea what they were doing in the farm system. The wrong coaches at the wrong places. So like we're just building the prospects up right now, which I mean for being 5 years, we have a lot of prospects right now for 5 years. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty good. I mean the Vladdy thing, I don't know why people also like they love young players too much. It's like the ghost whisperer. You hear about it, like, oh, this guy's coming. He's in the minor leagues. You don't see him every day. You don't know what's going on in their everyday life. They're not that as good as they are.
People get excited, and in some cases rightfully so, because it's untapped potential. I understand why people get excited, but you're right. It's like you haven't seen this person play. Like you don't know. And I don't begrudge people for getting attached to homegrown players. I think I said it to you last week. Like, I don't care if you're 4 years old or 84 years old. You're allowed to have a favorite player. You're allowed to have a guy that you like on your team that you don't want to see go. No one has ferociously defended Pete Alonso over the last year plus than me. I like Pete a lot. I think he should be back. I would want him back. There was times where I was saying, look, in the right market, I would consider giving Pete a $200 million contract, because I think if you look at AAV, he's worth it. And if you had to go to a certain level to make sure he stays, I think you'd have to do that. I'm not flip-flopping on it now. It's just, unfortunately for Pete, the market has said something else. So, of course, I don't want to give him near that money. I don't want to give him now any more than a 3-year deal, because it doesn't seem that anyone else wants to. Sense. And that's how it works.
That's not against yourself. Sound. It's not financially, you're not financially sound. You play to the market that you're available to you. Also, I think with the prospects too, by the way, I think Twitter kills the prospect. Kills them, but like it enhances them. Like how many times do we see Beatty hitting home runs in the minor leagues? And like every day, Beatty home run. Like I'm like, this guy's gonna come up and be the next Babe Ruth. If you see that, like you don't see you always see the hits or the home runs. You don't see the actual at bats, which is not great for the prospects. I'm like everyone's gonna be a star. So that's one thing I wish we didn't do as much as like the minor league farm. They just put everybody out there.
That's funny, and that's a good point. Something we haven't really talked about with regards to prospects, like social media in general for all of us. Chris, this as a comic, like you're putting your best foot forward. Everybody always says it's a highlight reel, right? It's not real life. It's whatever you want to show people. Right. Even if you're showing them vulnerability or downside or whatever the case is, it's still curated by you. And in this case, it's curated by the teams. It's curated by the people who run the social media to show, oh, look at Brett Beatty. Look what he's doing. And it's like, to this point, Brett Beatty's been the definition of a quadruple A player.
Yeah.
And if this was even 10 years ago, I don't think anybody would argue that, but people argue with me now because they're like, well, look what he does every time he goes down. And I'm like, you're only seeing the big home runs. You're seeing the hot streak of 2 weeks playing against pitchers who are horrendous.
Well,
that can't be called up.
It's a lot of the times he's hitting home runs where they're either up 10-4 or down 10-4. So you're not getting the back end, you're getting the back end of the bullpen of AAA. That's what you're getting throwing it right now. So I'm like, I think it's going to hurt a lot of like players in the future where everyone's just going to expect them to come up and be great.
And the big thing also when it comes to AAA, where Beatty has been thriving, when you see stats like that, people don't understand that AAA has turned into a hitter's haven. It favors hitters more than it favors pitchers. And the big thing that I always come back to, because it always sticks out to me big time, is when JD Martinez was here and he went down. He was working his way back up, and they asked him, hey, how are things going when it comes to getting yourself and getting your feet wet, right? Trying to get back into your groove because you signed so late. He always says it's kind of difficult down here because there's no velocity. So when I see a guy dominating and doing well, but then he struggles extremely when he comes up here, it's because he can't handle velocity. And everyone throws at least 98 miles an hour now up here. So if you're not getting that down low, it kind of inflates numbers and people think that you're going to be something that you're really not because you're not used to seeing something. And I think that goes hand in hand with what we've seen from Brett Beatty to this point, because when he's faced velocity, he just pounds the ball into the ground. He can't lift it.
Well, I think also what hurt Beatty and actually helped Vientos was that Beatty was like the chosen one. He was the first round pick. So you're getting the first share playing in the major leagues, where Vientos kept hitting and minor leagues kept hitting. So he was forced in his mind to be like, I got to keep working harder. Where there's something about the mind where like it's very big in baseball, where like if you have the mindset of like I'm going to do it, then you will eventually do it. Where Beatty probably never struggled in his life in baseball until he got to the major leagues. He probably never had a pitcher. He never faced a pitcher that was like, shit, I don't know if I can hit this guy until he faced the major leagues. And that mindset, when you're not used to being losing, basically, 0 for 4 a lot of times, you're not going to – it's going to wear on you a little bit.
Jump back into the comments here. One, just for my own sake of clarification to Edward. Sorry, brother, your argument doesn't hold water. Pete's not getting 200 mil. At best, he's getting 3 years at 31 mil per. I'm not saying he's getting it now. I was just using that as an example, saying how much I have defended Pete and where I stand on Pete, just so that folks who are new to the show aren't seeing me as somebody who's, wow, Vlad Guerrero Jr. is this new and shiny thing, and I've just completely changed my perspective. No, this is coming from a time where I didn't think the Mets were going to be in on Vlad. I thought the Mets were a foregone conclusion to keep Pete. I thought Pete's market was going to be bigger. It's a different time. It's ages ago as far as the conversation goes. I do want to bring up this other one really quickly. Keith, the media goon himself, says Toronto is Zero Sugar NYC. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Toronto.
I love Toronto. Toronto's a good town. Fun town. Their money is weird, by the way. You can't rip their money.
Yeah.
I went up there like I'll be able to rip it. I have freedom. So like I can't rip their money. It's so annoying.
It's funny. Toronto's okay. To me, Toronto reminds me of, it's a little bit of New York and it's a little bit of London mixed together, but it kind of has, to me, none of the charm that either city has and kind of all of the problems that both cities have. So I don't love Toronto. It's not my favorite place.
I've been there a couple of times. I like it when I'm there. I mean, I'm also hanging out with people that are local. So like they're showing me the good spots,
Yeah.
Like that.
Fair. Ibby, have you ever been to Toronto?
You're talking to, I don't get to travel as much as you guys.
I know.
Because of what I have.
Up north at 6 hours is a world traveler to you.
You don't understand.
You're
talking to a guy. You're talking to a guy that has 2 kids, a mortgage, lives in Jersey, and he's a teacher. I got no money, man. I can't go anywhere.
Just hop in the car one day and leave him. Leave the whole family. Get out of here.
Yeah, just get the hell out of here. You have to breathe a little bit. One thing I did want to put out there before we keep on going with the conversation. Shout out to the 450 people that are here right now, 100 plus on the YouTube side, 31 likes. Make sure you like the video. Also, I put a poll up on the YouTube side. Make sure you vote. I have 79 votes so far on this end. Simple question this week. Who would you rather have over the next 5 years? Pete Alonso or Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? 79% to 21% in favor of Vlad Jr.
21% are idiots, by the way.
I'm wondering if that is based off of what we talked about last week, which was Pete Alonso fatigue and just getting fed up and ready to move forward, or if people truly feel that they want Vlad. Either way, sound off in the comments. We'll get to them as quickly as we can. But if you haven't already, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, so when you subscribe, you can actually jump into the conversation and join us and get your comments read live on air.
I would rather have Vlad Guerrero Jr. for the next 10 years and the baggage that could potentially pose at the end than have Pete for the next 5 years, if that makes sense. To alter that conversation, I would take the longer deal and deal with him at the end of it than have Pete for the next 5, because I think Vlad Guerrero Jr. will be the better player for longer, not just over the next 5 years.
It kind of stings. Like, Pete's a good guy. He's done everything for the organization.
He's been a fantastic Met. Yeah.
But honestly, like, it is a problem where, like, I've heard, like, if you have the opportunity to go to the majors out of high school, you go. Because look. I mean, Vlad's an international free agent, but like it's the same. So you're going to be a free agent a lot younger mostly than the college guys. Because like look at Judge. Judge wasn't a free agent until he was 29.
Yeah,
I think 29, 30. Yeah. 30. So like that Soto is the perfect one. He's 26 and he's the biggest deal, which is a kind of a problem. But I think they should minimize the rookie contracts a little bit.
They should. I know they've made some strides, but they haven't done enough. Which, by the way, if Toronto didn't hold back Vlad Guerrero Jr. for like 13 games 6 years ago, he'd be a free agent right now, and this conversation would be very, very, very different.
Yes.
I think everything that we're saying comes down to this very succinct sentence by Chris Ram. Vlad is just the superior talent. And I think you cannot ignore that whenever you're having this conversation. Keith saying when Ibby says he's going to the islands, he hits Staten Island, Long Island, Manhattan.
That's it. That's all I can do, man.
Not Manhattan anymore with the congestion price. Not doing that.
Yeah,
exactly.
Here's a question from Barman San Diego saying, wait, is this the same Scopo that was on YKWD?
Yeah.
Is it?
That was me. Yep.
Okay. What is YKWD? I don't know. I apologize.
It's called. You know what, dude? It was Robert Kelly's podcast. I used to be the producer of it years ago. And Robert Kelly's, big comedian in New York. And
yes.
All the big comics have been on that show. So yeah, I used to produce that, just to run it for him. That was me.
There you go. One in the same.
I'm on the next podcast,
So far you are 2 for 2 in terms of people recognizing where you're from.
I just walk around Queens screaming about the Mets, so people see it.
Here's a good one from GSD over on Twitter saying, would you trade Vientos for Vlad if you could get an extension with the sign and trade? I would not.
I wouldn't do that. I could wait a year and get him.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to do that, to the point that I was making before of, unless you were like so gung-ho over a player because others were fighting to get him with better farm systems. But at that point, I would just say, no, I'm not going to pay that high for a guy that's only that I could potentially get as a free agent the following year. So they wouldn't have to give that much. And this is the same argument that I was having people, 4 years ago when it came to Lindor. Like, you're going to have to give this, and this. I'm like, no, you're not. You're not going to have to give that much. They're the ones that are against the wall. And I think Toronto realizes this. And even though they just settled by giving him whatever it's going to be, $28 million in arbitration, it's the same type of timeline that happened with Mookie Betts, with Boston, before he went to LA. Shout out to Master Flip over on Twitter who brought that point up, which is spot on. So it's like there's still an opening here for something to potentially happen. But again, you're not going to have to give up that much. You're not.
Look at all the prospects that the Red Sox gave up. I mean, the Dodgers gave up for Mookie, and all the prospects we gave up for Lindor. So, like, none of them panned out anymore. I don't know what Wolf is doing in Cleveland, and Verdugo is looking for a job. So, like, you don't know these prospects.
Somehow Andres Jimenez got $100 million deal like that. I completely missed that when that happened. Like, he got
a
6-year
$1 million deal.
He got $100 million. Now he's in Toronto hanging out. But
a lot of the fans were like, that was a terrible trade. We shouldn't have did it. What's wrong with you guys?
Oh my God, that first year when the one good year that Jimenez has had so far, everyone's like, you gave up the better player. Lindor stinks. Like, no, I don't think so.
Rosario's been on 5 different teams.
Yeah, I'm going to add this to the mix because I agree with you guys, and I also agree with the commenters. I see a lot of comments coming in saying you wouldn't have to give up Vientos. It's more akin to this situation. You guys mentioned the Lindor situation. I agree with all of that. I think it's a good conversation starter, this comment that is. But the one thing I'll add to it is what I said before. If you are acquiring Vlad, part of what you're doing is, one, obviously hoping to keep him long-term with Soto, which is going to cost a lot of money. And in doing that, you have to have cost-controlled assets as a part of the core. Vientos and Alvarez are those pieces. So those are the pieces you cannot afford to give up because, Chris, even if Alvarez is more of what we saw in year 2 than he is in year 1, which I don't think is true. Like I said, I think he's closer to somewhere in the middle, and I think he's going to hit for more power. But you got to remember, he's a catcher. So his offensive output doesn't have to be at the top of the league. It also doesn't have to be at the top of the league if you're a team that is also starting Soto, Lindor, Vlad Guerrero Jr., Vientos, and Nimmo.
You also have to realize, like, he's a catcher. You're right. So, I mean, I was catcher of small college, but like you have to also think about how you're catching the pitchers. So you're double what everybody else is. Your mindset is double what everybody. It's not just hitting. It's I got to catch. Especially at 22 years old, and what did everyone say? He wasn't good defensively. So he probably was more, wanted to work on that more than the actual hitting. And it takes time when you hit as a young guy. So I think that Alvarez will be better. He has to get more confident in his catching, I think. Then he'll be better at hitting. He'll relax more hitting, I want to say.
This is a good one. Another thing that's kind of saying everything we're saying very succinctly, and this is from Truro, who I believe is also a new commenter. Welcome to the show. Saying you can't trade MLB guys for Vlad. That's counterproductive. It's exactly my point. You could throw in a guy like the Jays have no need for McNeil or whatever, but you could throw in a guy that scratches an itch for them.
Beatty, if you want to do that.
Yeah, if you want to call Beatty a major leaguer, you could throw him in the deal. He's not going to move the needle, but maybe he's an extra piece that goes in. You could do that. But yeah, you're not trading any meaningful piece of your major league team because, like Truro says, it is counterproductive. The one thing that we haven't talked about yet, guys, and I do want to bring this up, Vlad and Pete and this Pete situation that's super nebulous, which Ibby and I have talked about for the last month and a half. We have mentioned Vlad in the past, but I do want to bring up this comment from Andre because a lot of this conversation today has been sparked by the fact that Hector Gomez and Mike Rodriguez are the ones that are saying that the Mets are putting a package together to go to Toronto for Vlad. You have to take that with the hugest grain of salt. We're not talking about this today because of those two quote unquote reports coming from these two guys who get more things wrong than they get right. We're talking about it because it is a meaningful conversation either way, and it makes sense for the Mets. But you have to take these reports, especially from Mike Rodriguez, who is wrong all the time, and I don't even know who this dude is. So I would be happy to eat crow. Chris, I'd be happy for these guys to be 100% right and the Mets get Vlad Guerrero, but we're not having this conversation because of them.
The Mets are buttoned up now. Like, you don't hear anything.
Don't hear anything.
So, like, I don't believe that at all. Also, I think the Vlad trade could go down if Pete signs somewhere else. That's the only thing. I don't think they want to give up prospects. I think they want to keep the prospects unless Pete goes somewhere else where you need the bat. So I don't think that's true at all. Also, if it was true, Passan would know about it. Like, Passan would say something.
Those are
the guys.
Yeah,
I agree with that too.
This entire thing is just a giant game of a really annoying game of chicken when it comes to all of this. And people can talk about wanting, and this goes back to what we were just saying before about the market itself. People can continue to talking about just end this, pay Pete, and this charade, blah blah blah. You don't have to, because when you look at it, this is the only option that Pete has. The Mariners are cheap. The Giants aren't doing it. Every other first base team that needed a first base talent, they've gone elsewhere. They've gone older. They've gone cheaper. They've gone the trade route. There's no one left. So eventually, we've said before, Stearns is cold-blooded. I wish I can give credit to the person who said this because it's well put. Stearns has a slow heartbeat. You're not going to bully him. Just because you have the money doesn't mean that you can just because the Mets have all the money now doesn't mean you're going to get the money.
Yeah, Mets don't realize. They think, pay whatever. Like, no.
Because then down the road, that makes you look like an idiot and taken advantage of. And people got pissed off and have been pissed off when the Mets have been used as a stalking horse the previous years. Look at Yoshinobu Yamamoto. You were used as a stalking horse there. He goes to LA and you're pissed off. So it's like he's going to make the right decisions. It's all about getting the right player. I don't think that David Stearns, like some people have said, hates Pete Alonso. I don't think that that's the case. I think it's more so this is what the market dictates now.
Yeah.
You had an opportunity to take a 7-year deal, buying out 1 year of arbitration. Fine. Call it a 6-year deal for $130 million. And you said no, dropped representation, and went to Scott Boras. And the reason why he did that, in my heart of hearts, the reason why he did that is because he looks at himself as Mr. Met. He knows he was never going to get the Lindor contract, but when Nimmo got the contract, he did.
Yeah, when Nimmo got that contract.
When Nimmo got that contract, shortly after that, when the whole Boras thing happens, and then you hear rumors of him wanting 10 years, that was the initial rumor. That's because he wanted to be Mr. Met. He thought that he deserves more than Brendan Nimmo. That's the contract that he wishes he could get, which is why he said 130 essentially is not enough. But I'm sorry, it's gone the other way, and the position he plays doesn't work.
Get that much money, which we overpaid for Nimmo, and he's like, well, I'm more valuable than Nimmo. I can get way more money than this. And that's where I think he messed up. And I swear, that was an Epler deal too.
That was an Epler deal, yes. That was not Stearns.
Stearns would not have given Nimmo that much money.
No, I said, listen, I said at the time, I like Nimmo. I've never loved Nimmo. I said at the time, I would not have given Nimmo that deal, but I do understand why the Mets franchise gave Nimmo that deal.
You needed that consistency in the organization saying, hey, we're not going to lose our players.
Correct.
That's what you needed, yeah.
And to your point, Chris, and honestly, to your point too, it'd be like, Pete is better than Nimmo, but you can go and get a better player than Pete or Nimmo now, or next year. You can go and you can play with a bigger sandbox than you could at the time with Nimmo. Nimmo's value is different. I feel like Nimmo is measured differently than Pete. Again, I would not have given him that deal. It's not a massive overpay. It's a slight overpay.
No, it's an overpay. It's an overpay. He was never a 20-year home run guy until the last couple of years.
It's an overpay from the year standpoint. That's what it was.
Years, and the money too. He shouldn't. I thought they were going to give him 5 for 75. That's what I was like. Oh, that's perfect for him. Yeah. But what, he got 8 for 120 or something like that?
No, he got. Didn't he get upwards of like 160? Didn't he get that much? No,
I thought his deal was like 185.
180? That much?
8 for 185. I think he's like 22 million a year, something like 23 million a year.
Something like that. And Armand's in the comments, and a lot of folks will they usually fact check us and make sure things like deals and when people's deals are up.
The one thing about Nimmo, which I'm kind of liking, he's going away from that leadoff hitter, the get on base kind of guy, where he's starting to now drive the ball. And I think now, as he gets older, that will be a better fit for him than just getting on, because he doesn't steal bases ever. So what's the point of him leading off? Basically, he sees pitches. Okay, but he has 20-25 home run power.
There's the deal. 8 for 162 coming in from Charlie and a lot of other folks. Thank you for checking that on us, keeping us honest as far as that's concerned. Yeah, that was a conversation we had, Chris, on this show heading into last season, even before Lindor's massive takeoff in the leadoff spot. I was preaching Nimmo needs to hit lower in the lineup. And if you're looking at his ability to get on base as the reason to keep him in the leadoff spot, getting on base is valuable throughout the lineup. It doesn't matter where you hit. Getting on base is not the only thing that makes you a leadoff hitter. This is not Little League.
If he stole bases, then yes, because he gets on base. He gets on base constantly, but he doesn't steal any bases. He's like afraid. I think he's afraid to, or he's not confident in himself. So I think make it now. Also, you have younger guys coming up that are going to be faster than him. Now are going to be leadoff guys in the future. So I think he's turning into a little more of a power hitter is the better way to go.
I think this is a good one from Edwin Condi saying Nimmo got his deal because other teams were bidding on him. Pete has no one. And I think this
it was just Colorado, though. He was never going to Colorado.
Yeah. Hometown, though, I didn't think so, but possible. Yeah. And Brad saying Nimmo was also paid as a center fielder, which is also fair. He did get that bump at that point as compared to the player.
And also viewed as a cheaper alternative for teams because Aaron Judge was also on the market. So he kind of was like, you got to pay close to $400 million for Aaron Judge, but I can get Brandon Nimmo for like mid-ones. Like,
we talked about that at the time. I
love that Nimmo went to left, though. I think that was very smart by Stearns. Listen, you're going to be here for a while because no one's taking this contract. We need to save you as much as possible.
Agreed.
I do think with regards to Nimmo, we said it at the time when he was a free agent. Obviously, the drop-off was dramatic, but Nimmo was far and away the second best outfielder available that year in free agency behind Judge, to Ibby's point. So look, again, drop off. Nobody's confusing those guys for, in the same stratosphere, but Nimmo was the next best guy. So I think to his point of, are you going to try to take Judge, a legacy Yankee, away from the Yankees, pay him $300 to $400 million, or could you just try to go out there and get Brandon Nimmo for, half that money, less than half that money? I think all of that plays a factor.
Nimmo hits in the postseason.
Dictates itself. The market dictates itself. You know what I mean? Like you look at it's all about supply and demand when it comes to free agency. When you're a free agent and who's a free agent at the time that you are a free agent is so important compared to what money you get paid.
It's like the quarterbacks in football. It's like when you're up, you're going to get paid, and you might not be the best quarterback, but you're going to get paid.
Let's look at it from this perspective really quickly. Put a wrap on this Alonso stuff. There's a couple. I'll take these 3 comments at once, kind of summing up the question I want to ask you guys. So Edward said, Alonso 3 years with opt-outs is a good deal. Armand said, I don't believe Stearns wants to make a move for first base while Pete is still on the market. And then Truro says Alonso 3 years with opt-outs and then signing Vladdy next year is the move, in my opinion. I think they're all pretty much right. I think the way I see this playing out ultimately is Alonso getting some kind of 3-year deal from the Mets with opt-outs, whether that's after 1 year or 2 years or both. And that allows the Mets to still be players for Vlad Guerrero Jr. next year in free agency. If you ask me, gun to my head on January 15th, I think that is the most likely scenario. I don't know how you guys feel about it.
I 100% believe it's going to be a 2-3 year deal with opt-outs. Maybe a 2-year deal, 2-year 80, which is a lot, but opt-outs after 1 year. And there's no way they're going to give him more than 3 years. It's going to, because they can always DH Alonso if they sign Vlad. That's like the worst
100%.
case scenario. That's the worst case scenario if he doesn't opt out of his contract.
The thing that I don't understand is if the Mets are offering a 3-year deal to him with opt-outs, and we've heard the rumors that, you know, the Boras camp and Pete came back and said, look, we're willing to take a 3-year deal. And I want to know what the difference is and why we're still where we are. Like, what is the difference in the language and the money between the two sides where we're still saying, like, no, like whether it's Martino or others saying that there is still a decent gap between the two. Like, I'm curious as to where the gap is.
I bet you it's 3 years, 120 is what
they I think it's
$40 million a year.
Higher AAV. Well, they're going for like $40 million. Where
well,
I think 3 years, 105. If you want to be a nice guy,
said that last.
That's what we said. Yeah,
we said that last week. Yeah, just like give him 100, 105. Call it a day. But here's the thing: if you want the record would then be, well, I think it'd be $33 million a year, essentially. I think it's what it was, because I think someone prior had for first baseman on the per year. I think
AAV,
it's 33.
The record is right now it's Miguel Cabrera. I think he made 31, and I think they're saying if Pete signed 3 years, 93.3 would give him the record. I think they said that on the Mets pod. Joe DeMayo and Connor Rogers were talking about it.
The problem with Pete is that he wants the years. He wants to play for a while.
He does.
Years. Yes. Now in his head, he's like, okay, well, they're not giving me the years. Let's get as much money as possible. Let's try to squeeze them out for everything that I could get out of them. Because
it shows you just the overall bag fumble that was by him turning down that 6-year deal. Like, you screwed up so much, and now you're trying to recoup things, and the market and the people that you're trying to get it from are basically saying, I don't think so, pal. Like, this is what you're going to get. Take it or leave it.
Pete got Judge eyes, where like he saw how much Judge was making, and he thought, I broke Judge's record. I'm as good as You're not as good as him.
You're not as good as him. You're not the same player. Yeah. Different positions. Like, no.
Different positions, but your batting average is way down than his. And he's just a way more dangerous hitter. I mean, I don't know. This year, it's scary to give him a bigger deal. Like, he was chasing sliders that were just off the plate constantly. And it's just like, I'm not going to give 5 years to that.
Yeah. And just to clarify, this deal from Chris Ram, 3 for 93.3, that would be $31.1 million a year. And that would just overtake Miggy's contract, which was 8 years, 248, 31 flat. It would kind of be the same way that Lindor got like $100,000 more a year than Fernando Tatis to just eclipse the money. That's what you would be.
More of a Boras thing though, or a Pete thing? You think it's more of a Boras, where like I set the market kind of?
That's a Boras.
That's
thing.
I
think
Boras
there's a bragging
thing.
rights thing for the player, but I think it's an agent thing of saying we reset the market.
It's definitely an agent thing, because I've been screaming about how why Soto was going to get paid big time is because, Boras hated the fact that Ohtani's representation got him the money that he did. So Boras was going to say, this is my sport. I'm going to be the guy. And that's why he pushed and forced for so much money and not deferring it either. So his real-time value completely crushes the overall Ohtani's contract. So it's definitely an agent thing. I'm sure Pete's asking for certain things as well, but I definitely think Boras is the driving force.
We're going to take this comment from Keith and give him his flowers, and then we're going to head into the break. Chris, I don't know. I know I said an hour. We're probably going to do 2 hours of the show.
I'll do whatever you guys want me to do. Want me to stay? I'll go. It doesn't matter. I want to talk kicking. Pitching is what I'm like dying.
All right, well, if you can, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but if you could stay, this has been fun. We'll keep you on. We'll head into the break after this comment. I got to give Keith his flowers on this because Keith is connected in the Mets organization. He said Nimmo is looked at in a better light by the organization and the players versus the way Alonso is looked at behind the scenes. This is something he said for years.
For a while.
He doesn't dislike Pete, but he has acknowledged from the information that he has that Pete is not necessarily beloved. He's a little egotistical. He's a little he is not the, I don't want just completely, I don't know.
I'm not trying to bury the guy.
Yeah. I'm trying to make sure I don't misquote Keith as far as this is concerned, but he does deserve credit because this is something that he has preached for probably 2 years. He said that the Mets should have traded Alonso because he never thought they really wanted him, long term because of things not just on the field. So I do have to give him credit because it does seem like that is how it's playing out. I don't know. Chris, you were pretty adamant that they don't really want him that much. So I'll give you the last.
It's very obvious. They're like, hey, if you want to go. It's like, if you want to leave, I don't really care. You could tell. I've heard too that that locker room was a Nimmo Lindor locker room. It was those two were the main guys. Who said? Winker said it too. Mm-hmm. When he came in, it was very obvious that Nimmo and Lindor were the leaders. Which you're like, oh, okay, Pete's not a leader. I thought, okay, maybe because he's a free agent, but I was like, that makes no sense. He's one of the better players on the team, and he was the face, basically. So something's going on behind the scenes where I think Pete might have got a little too cocky. I don't want to say cocky, but he thought he was better than what he was. Because of the home runs, breaking the record. New York City, everyone was comparing him to Judge. So I think that kind of hurt him a little bit. And then the last 2 years kind of came down to earth.
All right, so with that said, let's head into the break. We have plenty more to talk about. John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez, our guest this week, comedian Chris Scopo. We're talking all things New York Mets, of course. Spent an hour on the Pete Alonso stuff. We'll leave that in the rearview mirror for the second half, unless, of course, something amazing breaks while we're doing the live show. We'll jump back into that conversation. We'll come out of the break talking about pitching, first in the starting rotation, and then in the bullpen. If you're watching live and you're here for the first time, you're like, I don't want to sit through a break. Don't worry. It is just a quick 30-second ad spot that we need for the audio version of this show. So one more time, it's John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez, our guest this week, Chris Scopo. It is Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter. We will be right back. Yo, and just like that, we are back with Til Mets Do Us Part, live on Twitter, live on YouTube, like we are each and every single Wednesday, starting at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And of course, the best way to become a full-fledged participant in the show is here on the live stream. If you subscribe, your comments, your questions, your concerns, all of that stuff come in real time. We can see it. We can react to it. If you turn notifications on, you will never miss the opportunity to be a part of the live show. But we understand that not everybody can devote that kind of time. So if you miss any of it, whether you show up late or you have to leave early, this show will live forever on that same YouTube channel, which is appropriately called Til Mets Do Us Part. You can go back and you can watch anything you might have missed as soon as the live stream is over. And if you can't do any of that, shortly after we're done here, this will drop as an audio podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, all of those places and more. So you can take us with you when you're, I don't know, on a run, at the gym, on your way to work. It doesn't matter. You can take it on the subway to try to avoid some of that congestion pricing that is happening in New York. That sounds absolutely disgusting, but you can take us with you wherever you go. All of it courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. Before we get back into the conversation, Ibby, let's hit him with a quick word from our friends over at Independent Safes.
Absolutely, John. IndependentSafes.com. Independent Safes are protecting homes and businesses with secure residential and commercial safes. Fireproof peace of mind in every corner. Visit IndependentSafes.com today for security that stands strong. And of course, We always put over our friends over at Independent Safes. This week, maybe we want to put Hector Gomez and the barber, Mike Deportes, inside those Independent Safes, toss it in the river, lose the key because we don't like the BS that they spew and the tizzy that they put Mets Twitter into, if you will, how people go insane.
It's easy to get into a tizzy, though. They're very
believe me, everyone goes insane. And anytime I tell someone to calm down, I get basically told to go fuck myself. But either way,
the Mets need to go to the beach and walk into the ocean.
A lot of people just need to breathe a little bit and just try and calm down. But I know it's tough because the off season is so slow. But either way, I might put some people into that Independent Safe, but shout out to them. If you need a safe, you need anything along those lines, they'll hook you up. Tell them the guys over at Til Mets Do Us Part sent you.
Chris, I want to give you the opportunity before we get back into the Mets conversation to let people know where they can find you, where they can follow you, if you have any shows coming up, things like that. Most of our live viewers are on the East Coast in the tri-state area. So if you're doing comedy anywhere, go ahead and plug it now, please. The floor is yours.
At my all social medias is at Chris Scopo. I don't know why it says Officer Scopo on here, but that's not me.
I was going to ask you about that, but
I don't know why you have Officer Scopo there. I didn't do that, but it's at Chris Scopo on all social media. If you're in Connecticut, I'll be at Mohegan Sun this weekend. 5 shows at Fox Comics at Fox. Comics at Mohegan Sun, and then I have shows around the city nightly. I just don't know when or where. I gotta look it up. So hit me up on DM. You can DM me. I'll be available.
I used to perform at Comics all the time, and I was there during the transition. Like the first couple times I performed, it was Comics at Foxwoods, and then it became Comics at Mohegan Sun. And because of the beef with that whole situation, those two casinos being so close to each other and the club moving, I remember the first time I got to the Mohegan Sun location, they were like, please, I was hosting. And so they were like, please don't slip. Please don't say Foxwoods. The host last week said Foxwoods. Please don't say Foxwoods. It's like all that like behind the scenes stuff that like you as a comic don't care about. You're like, just don't give me anything to read. Let me just say comics. Like, don't make me say Mohegan Sun.
I didn't
fuck it up. I didn't.
going to this gig, it's like I'm going to spend 5 days inside a casino. It's going to be a nightmare. I'm going to lose my mind. I might lose all the money that I made this weekend. Gambling. There's nothing to do but gamble. You're like, all right, well, I guess I got to do it now.
I when I performed there and would stay there, I'm not a big gambler, but I do like food, and so like I would go to like all of the better restaurants. Like Bobby Flay used to have a restaurant in there that was really good. It was Bar American, and like so I would like take myself out to fancy dinners like every night, even though the comedy club would give me free dinner. Yeah. That's how I would burn all my money.
Yeah, I know what I do. I get my steps in when I'm there. I just walk around the casino. Get my steps in, and then just try to go to bed early because it's boring. It's boring.
It can be boring. And this is pardon the typo, but Keith saying I think we might need to invite Chris to the Queens Baseball Convention 2025. So I
saw that this year, and I didn't know about it. I'll go. Yeah.
Yeah,
come hang out with us. Yeah,
it's a blast. We're there. We get Keith does a great job. Keith and Dan getting former Mets, current Mets, great interview panels, a lot of great stuff. So you guys could talk about it off air or whatever the case may be. Got a long time. It's a year away, but yeah, it's a great time. I think you'd fit right in.
Yeah, well, I am a Queens baseball legend, Holy Cross, 2005. Yeah, so
there you go.
I'm Queens through and through.
From Holy Cross in 2005 to the Queens Baseball Convention in 2025.
Yeah, I've grown in 20 years. I really have. A long way in life. I don't leave Queens. I'm not a traitor, by the way. I never leave Queens for Brooklyn. Never. For Manhattan, maybe, but not Brooklyn or anything like that. I always stay Queens till I die.
Before we jump into the starting pitching realm, I did say we were going to leave this in the first half, but I do want to bring up this comment from Christine G because I don't want this to get misconstrued as far as any of our opinions go. She's saying, are there any Mets voicing support of Pete? And like, I'm sure that there are Mets fans, Mets players that want Pete back. I just think that, to Keith's point, I don't think he is the goofy, affable guy that he is portrayed to be. I don't think he's hated in this locker room, but I just don't think he's a huge leader in the locker room.
I think that's kind of taboo to be a player and to voice, if you're not a star or whatever, to try to go to your front office to get a guy back. I don't think that's like acceptable, really, as like
because especially when you're talking about so much money and you're trying to do something for yourself. You have one shot at this. You're doing things for your family, generational wealth, like a lot. Which is why I never understood why people like really ragged on Aaron Judge when it was like, you didn't call Soto, you didn't say. Like, it's not up to him. It's not him to say, hey, come back and like take money.
I think you sent him a text message and be like, hey, if you need any questions, let me know.
Yeah,
a little weird.
Maybe a little weird. But at the same time, it's like I think he knew he was going to be getting X amount of cash. So it's just like he's going to take the best deal for him and his family, what have you. Same thing here. It's like Manaea voices it during his car presser, if you will, saying how he's been working out with Pete. He hopes Pete comes back. So it's like you hear little things here and there, but a lot of times, to Chris's point, it's like these guys, like, you don't push for something. You just allow things to play out because your job is you're an employee, essentially. You're a player. You do whatever. It's like they're going to choose and spend their money how they want to. You love playing with a guy. You love having him on your team. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And if not, it's, again, no matter what, baseball's a business in the end.
Mm-hmm.
I think this comment, who I also believe is a new commenter, first time, welcome to the show, Carlos.
Welcome, Carlos.
I think this is a great way to transition the discussion from the offense to the pitching side, saying we need one ace, one good reliever right now. Diaz can't do it by himself. So let's take the starting rotation as the jumping off point. Mets find out that they are not a finalist for Roki Sasaki, which is a bummer, but I think we all kind of sort of expected that. I was really, really holding out hope just because the Mets did check a lot of the boxes that were being put out by his agent and his camp. So I was like, until I hear the Mets are out, I'm going to say the Mets have as good a chance as anybody. The Mets have been told that they're out. The Mets seem to like their starting pitching, at least to start the season. I don't think they're necessarily wrong in that. I do think they deserve the benefit of the doubt for everything they were able to do last year and what David Stearns has done over his career with Milwaukee and now the Mets building out a good rotation. But I think, Chris, that they might be opportunistic. There's a guy like Flaherty sitting out there. I think if a deal for Castillo ever could materialize, if they could stomach it, I think the Mets might be in the market, but I also think it's likely the Mets are done to start the year in the rotation.
Yeah, I think the ace is a dream. That's not happening. I thought maybe we could get Corbin Burns on a shorter deal, maybe, but obviously that didn't happen. He has a system and he's going to stick with his system that's been working for a long time. It's been working in Milwaukee and it worked last year. I do like that he does the depth pieces. If you ever watch Stearns, he doesn't build from within. He builds from like the outside first. He gets the depth pieces that are really good, that really help. So he got a lot of the depth pieces that we need. So he has it's 7 starters so far, 8 starters with Budo.
Yes.
So
with Budo, yes.
There's not going to be that DeGrom guy. That's not happening. So I think
unless it's developed, unless it's like that, that's the main thing. I think, and we talked about this.
We have Sproat in the minor leagues, but he got banged up in AAA last year, so I don't think he'll be up right away. I think it'll take him June, July.
Yeah, mid-season, you can see someone like Sproat. But I think that the overall plan, which a lot of teams are doing this, it really depends on where you are if you're going to spend that type of money because pitching has become so volatile. What type of return on investment are you getting when it comes to certain players? We've talked about it ad nauseum, but when it comes to the last 10 years, even you look at guys, 10, 15 years, you're like, okay, Max Scherzer, great deal for the Nats. They got everything they could out of him. Fantastic. Okay, that was a while ago. Garrett Cole, what he's provided for the Yanks so far has been fantastic. They still got another 4 years, and he was kind of a little bit up and down last year, so you're kind of wondering. And they haven't won yet either. So he hasn't really provided them with getting them over the hump, which at the time they were saying, we're a big pitcher away. We're one pitcher away, and it hasn't happened. So it's like it really depends on age, which is the big thing, and how much tread is on said tires. They offered $325 for Yamamoto, because that's unheard of to see a pitcher at that young of an age. You hope for someone like Sasaki. They couldn't play the money game here because it was more preference because it's international market. So it's like he's going to choose where he wants to go. Okay, but still, wanting someone at 23, makes sense. You don't want to be giving guys 6, 7, 8-year deals when they're 30+ years old and they've thrown X amount of innings so far, because you're basically buying a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, I think
why are you going to do that?
Stearns has realized that if I'm going to spend big money, it's going to be on everyday players. It's going to be on guys that are in the
which it should be
every single day. I can build a rotation my way and figure it out on small. Because look, if say Burns gets hurt, that's a year you lost him from. So it's $30-something million down the drain.
Right.
Well, he knows I'm not going to spend big money on that unless it's a young guy, obviously. But I think we need to look at it. Let's trust him. He did do well last year. He's done well in Milwaukee. Let's see what he does. Obviously, if it doesn't work out, they will go get a pitcher in the middle of the season. So,
yes,
he can do that. So that's not a problem. The Castillo thing, I'm not in love with Castillo. Like, he's going down a little bit. He's 32, 33. So I don't want to give up major prospects for him. And that's the only other guy I could see getting traded right now is him.
I like Castillo, but I think the positives with him are he does pitch a lot of innings and he is cost controlled at a good number. It's a lot, but it's a good number in today's pitching market.
Yeah.
25 a year.
If it's money, I'll take him, but I don't want to give prospects for him. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think you'd have to. I don't think you have to give up a haul, but I think you'd have to give up something, because the thing is, you would want to take, here's the tricky part. I think if Castillo was going to get dealt, he would have gotten dealt by now, because the Mariners would want you to take money off of their hands so that they could reinvest money in their offense. I think that you're right. In the first half, you mentioned like a guy like Acuna going there. They need infielders, and they need infielders who can hit, but we don't know what Acuna is. We don't know what Beatty is. We don't know even what Jet Williams is. They're trying to win now with the pitching staff that they have. They would want
Vientos.
They would want a Vientos, or that's why I was pushing, again, not as a marquee part of the deal, but I was like, if you could give them a couple good prospects and then you could allow them to take McNeil, you're going to kick money in on the deal, because McNeil's not great, but McNeil does give them a certain certainty about him that they would be looking for. Now, I think they'd want to shoot higher, but you'd give them like a high-level prospect who's super close on the infield. You give them McNeil, who could be a stopgap player, and you kick in some money. Now, along with kicking in that money, that does make Castillo a more expensive player, but I think he's still worth the money that you would do on a midterm deal, which, his deal is for 3 more years. So I think it's possible. I just think he becomes more of a mid-season move. And I see Dylan Cease being mentioned in the comments. I think Dylan Cease is a mid-season move if they need him. Sonny Gray has a no trade. He'd have to agree. I think he's a mid-season move, because I think Chris is right. I think unless you consider Senga to be an ace, I think the ace thing is out of the question to start this year. I just think it is.
Yeah, we've talked about on the show before how Stearns likes to go with the depth and having excess, because we said multiple times before that the game, a season of 162, you have so many injuries and so many things happen. Like we said, the volatility of pitching, you got to have 7, 8, 9, 10 guys. And when you look at it at the ready, people can say that the names, they don't like them, but they have at least 8 arms that can eat up some innings. And then you look at the back end when it comes to the farm coming up at some point, you could see a Brandon Sproat mid-year, depending on how things go. You could see a Nolan McLean at some point, during the season, potentially. You're not going to see Jonathan yet. I don't think you'll see Blade Tidwell yet either, but there are options along the way towards getting that overall depth. But I agree, and I've been saying this also, I think that they are going into the season with the arms that they have. Now, could something fall into their lap where it's like you take a Jack Flaherty for 1 year? It's possible, but I'm not like, if I wanted to equate it to like JD Martinez last year, something kind of like falls into their lap. Like that's the only way. They're not going to be.
Yeah, but Jack Flaherty is another one of those middle of the guy. He's the middle.
He is.
Yeah,
middle guy.
He's not going to stand out.
No, it's not. It's not a standout guy. But if they just wanted to continue the whole depth thing, because there's not a guy there. But I'm with you guys in saying that I think something is more likely to happen during the trade deadline and how things become a lot more available, because there are guys that are going to be available at the deadline that you don't even realize right now. And Castillo, I am a Castillo fan. I have seen the stats and how they've gone down a little bit and they question some of his stuff. But for what he provides, it makes a lot of sense, in my opinion, for this team. from an innings perspective, for a guy that goes out there that can protect the bullpen, which we all have questions about when it comes to the Mets bullpen, a guy goes out there and no matter what, he's going to give you at least 6 innings. Okay. He still gets the strikeouts. He averages about 170 plus innings a year. So he's a guy, in my opinion, that fits. I think he would do well in New York also. Even though he's only pitched in places like Cincinnati and Seattle, I still think he would provide something for this team that is needed. But that is more likely going to be a mid-season attempt at an acquisition. But once again, gonna be tough no matter what, because come mid-season, you might see teams like Baltimore finally realizing, hey, we need some pitching because we're really shitting the bed over here when it comes to our arms. And they might say, okay, we'll finally part with one of our highly regarded prospects just to close the deal to get Castillo here for 3 years to try to help us push a little bit to compete with the Yanks and the Sox.
You know, it's funny, Chris, you say, what are they doing? And like, obviously we don't focus a lot on other teams here, especially if that other team has nothing to do with what's going on with the Mets in the immediate term. But it's crazy because Baltimore seemed like they were finally this team, this great baseball city. They've been in the doldrums for so long. They have all these great young players. Their ownership finally changes, and they still didn't spend any money. Now, look, we talked about Corbin Burnes. I don't think he's a great 8-year investment. I didn't want the Mets to play with Corbin Burnes for 8 years, but God damn it, the Baltimore Orioles should have given Corbin Burnes 8 years.
They also have new owners too. You got to make a.
That's what I'm saying.
A lot of money too. Yeah,
a lot of money. I was like, I thought he was going to stay with that, but I was like, oh, these guys are definitely going to pay for Corbin. He had a great year. You know, you want to make the splash the year they knew, but nothing. I'm like, and they could probably lose Santander. I don't know what's going on with them.
So I mean,
like, look, you gave money. You don't want Santander, but you decide to throw ridiculous money at Tyler O'Neill and Gary Sanchez. Like, what are you doing? Like, I don't understand.
They can afford to lose Santander with the way their offense, their young offensive players are, but they need pitching. And to me, they're not to say that they're a pitcher away from winning a World Series. They might be, but Corbin Burnes on an 8-year deal might get them over the hump in the next 2 or 3 years. And then it's all worth it again with their new ownership that has a fuck ton of money. And in a league where nobody seems to spend money outside of the Mets, the Dodgers, the Yankees, and every once in a while, another team does something stupid like the Angels or whatever.
Every fan wants to spend money. They just can't.
Yeah, the Blue Jays are trying to spend money like crazy. I thought for sure that they would do something big, and they just didn't, and that is frustrating to me just as a baseball fan because more of these teams need to spend money. I'm tired of billionaires saying they don't have money to spend. It's gross.
It's the worst. Yeah, it's the worst. Now that I have money, now that the Mets have money, I'm like, spend your money. You're poor. Stop it. Stop being poor.
Stop being to spend.
I'm gonna bring up this comment from Rosie. And it's going to be impossible to answer the actual question, but I think it's a good jumping off point once again. She says, the question is, how many innings will this rotation pitch and how many runs will they give up? There are question marks everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I have said this for the last couple weeks, last couple months. It is a luxury in modern baseball to have an ace, a true ace stopper, goes out there, throws 200 innings, throws 7 innings, is legit elite at the top of the sport. It is a dying thing to have. A lot of those guys are either on the back 9 of their career, they're just coming up, so you're not sure that they can duplicate it, in year 2 or year 3 or whatever the case may be, or they're hurt because guys wind up on the shelves all the time. So I don't want to be Moneyball here and say, you replace the great pitcher in aggregate. But Chris, that's kind of what you need to do nowadays. If you have 7 really decent starting pitchers, you're looking at quality of innings, and then you build a good bullpen and you're like, how do I just put together really good innings over the course of 162 games? Because when you get to the playoffs, if you're lucky enough to get there, you're throwing your best pitchers in weird spots anyway.
I think they're hoping between the starting 6, anywhere between either 130 to 170 innings between each of them to try to, that's like their goal basically. If they have a pitcher that throws like 5, like Senga did last year, that's going to not be good for the team at all. It's just, that's what they're hoping. They're hoping to just get guys that give you innings and somehow get to the bullpen. I don't really know what they're doing in the bullpen either. Bullpen's tough though. Bullpen's tough because
bullpens are fickle.
I heard Tanner Scott wants like 4 years, 80 million. I'm like, that's a lot for a reliever.
Yeah, it is. I would sign Tanner Scott.
Yeah.
I would sign Tanner Scott for whatever money he's asking for a 3-year deal, because I think the Mets need to be a little aggressive in the bullpen right now.
375. I would
4
do it.
years is hard.
Yeah, but also like you're going to give him the same money as basically Diaz. If 4 years, 20 million each, 20 million a year. Yeah. That's a lot for a guy that you never know with relievers. It's 1 year good, 1 year bad.
Yeah,
it's got a high walk rate too, so it's one thing that if the wheels come off, it could get ugly. But yeah, I think it's you're hoping for the best when it comes to the development of this pitching lab, and they feel clearly that they wanted to retain Manaea coming back. They believe in his second half, so you hope that the fears that I've had on this show when it comes to Manaea being at the top end of this rotation is, the amount of innings that he threw last year, the most he's ever thrown. How is he going to bounce back? Is he going to be able to handle it? People have talked about, you bring in Clay Holmes to be a starter, and he's been a reliever. Is he able to stretch out? Can he do this? He claims that every year he preps to throw 150 plus innings. So that is what a starter in today's baseball, you hope you can get out of them. Yeah. So he says he's ready. We'll see what happens with Frankie Montas. I know everyone hates that deal and rips on him. The only thing I can say on that is I hope that he can provide something better. We're a little bit post the shoulder injury, but at the same time, we have to understand that David Stearns has shown, to Chris's point earlier, that look, if something's not working, I'm going to pivot and I'm going to go elsewhere and get something else, something better. And I'm going to change things up. Just because something is done doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be stubborn and I'm going to stay with this. If it's not working, they will pivot. We'll see what happens in that sense.
Yeah, I'm very bullish on Clay Holmes with the starting rotation. I think they're going to make him hammer his sinker. They just throw his sinker
as he should,
and give me ground balls. You have a good defense behind you.
That's the biggest difference between the Mets and the Yanks. A good defense, yeah.
Yes. Also, and like when he was a starter, he was on the Pirates, and let's be honest, Pirates are not a well-run organization. They have good pitching, but they're just lucky. I think they're going to get in the lab and going to go. I want you to hammer this sinker at least 70% of the time, and then he has a good out pitch with a slider. So I think that's what they're focusing on. That let's get the defense good. Stern loves defense. He loves the guys that play defense. So if he can, get that ground ball rate up there, like 30-something%, that's pretty good. That would be a good one for him. So I'm bullish on that. If it doesn't work, you go back to the pen.
We talked about it when they first signed him. It's a very savvy signing, because even if he is a fifth starter type, $12.5 million a year is an absolute steal. And then if he winds up after a year or half a year or whatever, it doesn't work out and he has to go back to the bullpen, for a setup man who has experience as a closer in the postseason in New York, all of that stuff, you're really only overpaying him by maybe $500,000, maybe $1 million. So it's just a good all around deal. I'm with you. The sinker and the slider are elite pitches, and the Mets are going to roll out a 6-man rotation, I would say, for 90% of the season, if everybody is healthy, because they're going to want to ease Senga back in. He's more effective with that. They've got guys with, I know Montas is removed from the shoulder injury, but injury concerns, keeping him fresh. Clay Holmes not being able to throw more than 150 innings. I think over the course of a 6-man rotation, I think the Mets are poised to do really well in the rotation. I don't think they're going to have anybody who's blowing people's minds, but I think it's going to be a very solid rotation. I like this rotation better than I did last year's rotation heading into the year.
They do want to save the arms for the postseason. You saw how the arms died in the LA series. Where
Manaea he had nothing left.
He had nothing left.
He had nothing left. So
I like the 6-man rotation. I mean, I think that everyone's like, 5. Yeah, you're not going to get Manaea. Probably going to miss 5-6 starts. Senga 5-6 starts, but you're going to have him fresher if you want in the postseason. And I'm not worried about winning the division, or I just get me in the postseason. That's all I care right now. Just get me in there.
Just get in, get hot. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's it's kind of like hockey and basketball now. Just get in somehow and then do your damage.
And I think a lot of people are so upset when it comes to the pitching because of the lack of names, like we just said before. But something I brought up 2 weeks ago was, and then to John just saying you don't want things to be done within the aggregate or looking at stats or projection systems and like that, whether it's Zips or Steamer or whatever it is that you're looking at. But when you look at the Mets pitching, according to said projections, they rank within the top 5 in the NL of what they think they're going to do. Mm-hmm. They also rank in terms of return on what they've put into it money-wise. They're plus 10 million. So I think they spend 80 something million. They say it's really worth 90 something million. So it's like they've clearly the projections and the things that David Stearns looks at and how they go about making this entire thing work. They like what they see, and they think that the Mets can actually outperform what a lot of expectations from the fan base are. But I think when it comes to fans, they look at things and they say, what's a name that I know? And it's like, I don't know this name. Or someone says, Frankie Montas stinks. Okay, then he stinks. Then it's like, well, why don't I have a Garrett Cole? Why can't we bring back Jacob deGrom? Why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? And it's like, maybe you should just allow it to play out a little bit, because like we've said, everything is always going to be seen in the light of, let's see how this goes, and then we can pivot, we can do this, we can do that. There's never any settling when it comes to David Stearns. It's never, I'm going to sit here and I'm just going to watch this play out. It's like, no, you can sit there and watch something play out in terms of the market for free agency like he's doing now, which is smart. But when it comes to the actual season, everything, it's always churning. The bullpen's always moving. You got new names every time. People on the bench, there's always something going that's going to be different. So that's what
he was so quick to cut bait with guys. I know none of these guys were like big money dudes, but like how quick was Joey Wendell off the team? How quick was Hauser off the team? After like Hauser was a little different because they bumped him to the bullpen. Then he had some success. Then he didn't, but even
Navarro's got a base hit to win the game. I was at the game for San Francisco. He was gone.
He was gone. Yeah. And I said in our preview last year when everyone was talking about like, what's your grade of Stearns, this and that. And I had said then, I go, I'm not grading the guy yet. I will grade him around the deadline, and I want to see if he's the anti-Billy Epler, and that if I do something that doesn't work, will you show the balls to not be stubborn and pivot? And he's been doing that. So it's like, I'm not going to rip the guy. I'm going to let him do his work. I'll let him do his job.
He adapts. He adapts quickly. And
he does.
Okay with it, yeah.
I don't love Andy Martino. I don't think anybody really does. But in one of the articles he wrote, he did say that Stearns views the roster as like a living document. And it's always evolving and you're never stopping putting the work into the roster. And I think that is a great way to summarize it. And I think that's what we've seen from him. And that's what you want out of a baseball exec. Like when people say things about Stearns, like, oh, he's running the Mets like they don't have money. They don't see the big picture. They don't see that this dude, just because you have money, it is no guarantee. Cohen being able to get involved to get Soto across the finish line is great. Him jumping in to try to get Yamamoto done, or in a really weird situation, trying to be opportunistic with Carlos Correa while he's drunk in Hawaii, saying like, that's what the big owner is supposed to do. The day-to-day stuff, I don't want my owner involved, especially when you have one of, if not the brightest baseball minds running your team. Let that guy do his job.
Yeah, oh yeah. Stearns is smarter than everybody, I think. That's the thing I realize. He's smarter than everybody, where like they're just jumping off on the fact that we didn't get this guy, we didn't get that guy. He's building the blocks to have a good year where like, okay, this guy goes down, I have this guy ready to go. That's what makes a great team, is having capable backups, having people come right there. How good was Taylor, the trade for Taylor last year, where he became the starting center fielder? He got big hits. I mean, he's not the greatest player, but if we didn't have him, Bader would have been the guy, and he was batting like 200 by the end of the year. So you got to give the guy a chance to realize that, okay, I have depth here, I have depth here, I have depth here. That's where he's great at. He's at the little pieces. He's great at finding the edges to make the team better.
Yeah, Ibby always says, improving on the margins. I like to say you've got to it's sexy when you improve the ceiling of a team. A guy like Soto, when they went out and got Cespedes, like that improved the ceiling of the team. But you can argue it's almost more important to improve the floor of the team.
Yes. Yeah,
because before Cespedes, there was Kelly Johnson and Juan Uribe and Tyler Clippard. Nothing of that was sexy, but that was all as important. And then Cespedes was the one that made them a World Series contender. And Stearns is not only really good at improving on the margins or growing the floor, but he also enjoys doing it. Like you can see like the way he gets excited about like, oh, let me see what's going on in the Rule 5 draft. Let me see what I could do here with these machinations. It's like
the diamond in the rough. The little diamond in the rough, he loves that. He loves doing that stuff. Which is why the Montas signing, I was like, does he know something? Like, does he see something that we can't see? You know, I was like, wow, that's Montas, but I was like, maybe he sees something that he can kind of fix in him in the numbers.
And I know a lot of people on Mets Twitter are very angry about when it comes to Montas and how some try to spin it. And they might even hear us today saying, oh, we're trying to spin Montas or we're shaking our ass for Montas over here. It's like, it's not that. It's more so I like to equate it to what last year was in that, you know, Luis Severino was signed for $13 million, and everyone was like, this guy's terrible. He was the worst pitcher in baseball, and you give him $13 million, and it's like, let the guy do a job. Frankie Montas last year got $16 million from Cincinnati. Did it pan out in Cincinnati? It didn't. He got dealt, goes to Milwaukee, former Stern stomping ground, changes some things, focuses on certain pitches, became a different pitcher in the second half. Strikeout rate goes up, swing and chase and miss rate goes up. Now he gets, 17.5 a year, an increase of 1.5 a year. It's like, and they're like, oh, this is too much money for this type of guy. I'm sorry. If you don't develop pitching, you pay guys that provide you innings. Mm-hmm. This is what happens in the game of baseball. I'm not saying anything that is groundbreaking. It's just common sense, but people don't want to hear it because they're like, we shouldn't be doing this. It's like, okay, well, this team needs to do a better job of developing pitchers. Yeah. Like, that's what you have to do. And we hope that we have something when it comes to Sproat and Tong and McLean. You hope you have something so you don't have to spend $17 million on a guy like this.
So quickly. Tommy John, if you have one little thing, you're Tommy John. Boom. Get done. Yep. So, like, you can't be giving these 5, 6 – you lose a whole year on somebody like that.
It's also a massive improvement. Just looking at Montas, he's a massive improvement on stuff. One of the things I always preach and that I swear by as far as, you know, Major League Baseball is concerned, especially in the bullpen, but it matters in the starting rotation too. Give me stuff. And look, Quintana was on his way to being DFA'd, and to his credit, pitched huge games for us in the second half, monster games in the playoffs. Thank you so much for doing that. But you cannot argue that Frankie Montas does not have better stuff and therefore better ability than Quintana. He does.
Yeah, and you saw how Quintana was overmatched versus the Dodgers. Like, if you're not chasing,
because he had to be perfect. Yeah, if he wasn't, and they don't chase. That was the whole thing. They don't chase
at all. So you gotta kind of got guys that, you know, get in the zone. He does have a live fastball. So, I mean, like, he throws hard, and then we'll see. Maybe they'll get in the lab. Maybe they'll work on his two-seamer more to get into the lefties. So you got to give him time to just develop and see. And if it doesn't work out, it's 2 years deal. Okay, we're done.
Yeah. Exactly. Jump back into the comments here. This guy came up a lot when we first started talking about pitching. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it would be a long time from now, but I do want to give credence to the commenters that brought him up in the form of Andre's comment saying the Mets going after Sandy Alcantara from the Marlins at the trade deadline. I don't know how realistic it is. Maybe it's a way off. It's just a name. Cease gets mentioned. Castillo gets mentioned. Pablo Lopez, Sonny Gray. Alcantara, not as much. So I just wanted your thoughts on this.
You're going to have to overpay for him. That's the thing with being in the same division. You know, he's a great pitcher when he's healthy. I don't know how healthy he's going to be. And, you know, you have to see, is he going to be start at the beginning of the year? I'm not even sure.
I don't know. I'd have to double check.
I think Sandy is starting the year. I think he is. And for me, and I know people are bringing up Sandy because I know I listened to former guest of the show, Ryan Finkelstein over at Locked On Mets. He's the one who brought this up and talked about the possibility of him being a target. And it's like, I would love to have him, but I think that a lot of teams would be interested. And again, it comes down to what you have to offer. But I think the Marlins are playing a dangerous game here because he's coming off the injury. And what's the one thing that Sandy is known for? He's a guy that throws a lot of innings. He's out 200 plus innings. It's unheard of in this game. He is an ace. When he's on, he's an ace. But let's also not forget what Sandy was prior to the injury. Maybe it was the injury that was playing a factor, but he had a rough year. Like, he wins the Cy Young, and then he comes back and he has a really, really rough year. Then he gets hurt. Now he's trying to come back. What type of guy is this going to be? If he comes out and he pitches to a 2 ERA.
Yeah, you're right.
That's awesome. Yeah. Great. They can cash in. But if this guy comes out and he starts throwing, the fastball's not as live anymore or what have you, maybe he's throwing to a 4 ERA again like he did before he got hurt. You kind of wonder, like, did we miss the boat on this? Honestly, in my opinion, I think he will be gone by the deadline. If it's the Mets, it's a possibility only because
they'll trade him they get.
Yeah, only because I'd say it's a possibility because this Marlins, front office, they don't give a shit who they're selling to because they'll give away players to any. They don't care if it's in division or not. They just want to clear all this money that's going to end up biting them in next year's offseason because they're not going to have enough money to actually reach the limit that they're supposed to be at by the bylaws of the Players Association. So they're going to get hit with shit next year because they don't have anyone on the books. They have no money anywhere.
They haven't signed anybody, right? Something like that?
No, zero. They've spent zero. And
$0.
People.
Insane.
Churro saying Churro saying basically what you just said. If Alcantara, I think Alcantara is likely if he comes back healthy and looks good. Bendix deals in the division too, doesn't care. This front office is wily in that regard. Let's get back into more of the here and now. Well, we talked a little bit about Tanner Scott. We talked a little bit about the bullpen in that sense. Bottom line is the Mets probably need, I think, 2 pieces in the bullpen, regardless of how high you want to shoot. Tanner Scott would be great. If not him, you can go to a guy like Carlos Estevez, Kirby Yates, bit older. He's out there. I think you need a lefty. That's why I would be more in the Tanner Scott ballpark than some people. Ibby said he'll be back in a minute, by the way. So you and I, Chris, will take this for a second. But, look, you've got Domenico saying, I want Tanner Scott. He follows it up by saying you can sign Scott and Yates and then live with our starters to begin the season. Stanley Babbage says bring back Stanek. I would absolutely bring back Ryan Stanek.
Yeah.
Look, I think the Mets have the makings of a good bullpen, but I think the Mets need one more sure thing, and we're talking bullpen, so it's always sure with quotes, and one more close to sure thing. So for me, it would be like Tanner Scott and Stanek, or Tanner Scott and Yates, or Yates and Stanek. I think you need to do that kind of a move, or those kinds of moves. I
want Yates bad. I don't know why he hasn't been signed yet. I think Yates is a good pickup. He's older, but he's a good pickup. They need a lefty too. Lefties, so if not Tanner Scott, I think who lefty we had got hurt last year out of the bullpen.
Brooks Raley.
I would bring him back. I mean, he'll be probably, I think, like June. They said
June or July, so he wouldn't help you out of the gate, but that's okay. You could cobble it together.
I'll sign him just to get another lefty in there. He's going to be cheap because he's coming back from the injury. So I like to get him in there as well. Scott worries me. He the longer deal and the high value that does worry me. Of like, I don't know if he's going to be worth it. Is he going to in 1 year be dead? I don't know. So he pitched a lot last year. He pitched a lot for the Marlins and San Diego. So I'm a little bit scared on him. If they sign him, great, but I'm a little scared that he might be. The bullpen's so tricky. It's such a tricky team. You never know. I like Stanek. I want him back. I think he's a big game pitcher. I think he gets bored. He gets bored in the regular season.
I think you're right. I think that's a good way to describe him.
Give him a guy on second and third with nobody out. He'll be lights out, be Mariano. But crazy. Yeah. It's a 4-run game. He fucking gets lit up.
Yeah.
Ibby, we were just to fill you in, we were talking about how the bullpen at large, but I was saying how I think the Mets need 2 pieces, one that's a little bit more of a sure thing and one that's, closer to that. So, go get me Tanner Scott and Stanek, or get me, Kirby Yates and Stanek, and bring back, like, they need to just add something. Even if I see in the comments, people are saying like, what about a reunion with David Robertson? Like, I don't think he's not the top tier guy, but if he was like the second guy, I wouldn't even be upset about that. Cause look, you've got Diaz. I think Reed Garrett was overworked. I think he's a good arm. I've always liked Sean Reed Foley's arm, but he's a middle reliever. He's got to be healthy. He's got to show it. I think Dediel Nunez has a great arm, but he needs to be healthy. So there's just a lot of questions. So that's also why I wouldn't be upset if you're like, hey, look, David Robertson is healthy. David Robertson is going to give you X. I think the Mets need a little bit of assurance in the bullpen, insurance, whatever you want to use. Like, I just think they need something that's certain.
They need a guy they can count on besides Diaz.
Yeah.
They need a guy that, okay, our Diaz can't close tonight. We don't have to worry. That's where
I definitely agree with that. And that's why, I think that's why the chanting for Scott is getting louder from the fan base. And I think also why the Mets realize that they should take a meeting with the guy to see what he's asking for and the type of person that he is and what he fit and things like that. But I'm with you, Chris, also. Like, I saw some of the stats and I saw some people posting about the walk rate and how things could potentially fall off for a guy like this. And for him coming off the year that he did, of course, he wants to get that money. But we also have to realize that this market, as someone said in the comments before, the bullpen market is so slow because, like to your point, Chris, the bullpen is always fickle for any team. You never know what you're going to get from a guy year to year. Nobody is Mariano. We've seen ups and downs with Edwin Diaz. We've seen ups and downs with some of the great closers in the game too. One guy is dominant one year, he stinks the next. We saw Aaron Loop was great here, goes to Anaheim, stinks, falls off the map. Like all these things can happen. But I'm with you. You need something. You need more. And I think when it comes to bullpens, I think people should be a lot more willing to accept names that they don't understand or why someone is brought in, because those are the guys that provide. So when I see David Stearns and he's made bullpens with guys that I've never heard of in Milwaukee, I trust the process here that he's just going to churn guys and he's going to find something that works. I got the update here before from Tim Healy talking about the bullpen. They have interest in left-hander Tim Hill, who pitched for the Yanks last year. He had a 2.05 ERA and 35 appearances, a 1.08 ERA in 10 postseason games. Could be a nice fit. Would be nice to get a lefty in there. I think from what I saw, it looked like he was like an extreme side armor. I don't know if it was a side armor or a submarine.
He's the guy they should have brought in to face Freddie Freeman in the World Series.
Right, exactly. Yeah. As opposed to just letting Cortez group one to him. But having a guy like that would be ideal, and then seeing if they can get somebody else. I question, and people don't like when I say this, but I question if Stearns would pay that amount for a relief pitcher because he knows what he can do in terms of building a pen. He might say, look, if I'm going to give $75 million to a reliever, but I think I can do better by doing something else for lesser money, I'll take that $75 million and I'll put that towards Anthony Santander. Yeah. Like something along those lines, With
the bullpen now, though, it's a little tricky because if you get a lefty, you can't just get a lefty that's good on lefties because now you have to face 3 batters.
Right.
So you need a guy that can go kind of both ways. That's why I said Raley was pretty good. So I was like, something like I wouldn't mind bringing him back. It'll be later in the year because he's got hurt.
Right.
But you can't. I think a Tim Hill is very lefty oriented. I don't think he's as great versus righties, which would scare me a little bit with him. So you can't just have the guy that is pure lefty on lefty anymore. It doesn't exist.
That it's a great point. And it's something that like all those pitchers, a lot of them to their credit have adjusted to, and the league is now like the teams have started to adjust. Like, okay, we need a guy who's a crossover guy. We need this guy. Like it used to just be so easy to plug and play any lefty. And it's funny because Ibby, you bring up, what Stearns was able to do in Milwaukee with these no-name guys. And that's true because it's a 1-for-1 with David Stearns. But you also look at Tampa, and I always joke, like every guy in Tampa Bay, they come out of the bullpen. You've never heard of them before. They all look like generic creative players in MLB The Show. Every guy is white and has a ginger beard, and then they're great. They're great for like 2 years. You've never heard of them before. You've never heard of them again.
It's over.
Yeah, but they're great. And then it's like, oh shit, here are the Rays in the ALCS again with a bunch of people you've never heard of. Like you do more than any position in the sport. You have to temper fans to be like, embrace these guys you've never heard of because you don't know where, like they just pop up.
I don't know. Daniel Nunez came out of nowhere, and he's like,
came out of nowhere.
Yeah, I had no idea who that guy was before last year.
No,
so you gotta realize that. That's where I trust Stearns, where he'll find something there. It's gonna take. The bullpen will form like probably right before spring training.
Yeah, it's funny because this has nothing to do, or it has a little to do with the Vlad Guerrero Pete talk that we were having in the first half. But I'm going to steal this a little bit from the Mets pod. I was listening yesterday, and Joe DeMayo, Connor Rogers, friends of the show, they do great work. Been on the show before with us, been in the QBC, and the question was posed, maybe that you kind of just brought up. It was like, look, if you're going to say the Mets are going to get Pete, it's a foregone conclusion. They're going to sign him to some kind of 3-year deal, some kind of opt-outs, whatever. That's going to be their first baseman. After that, would you rather them spend $20-some-odd million on Tanner Scott, or would you rather them spend $20-some-odd million on Santander to be the DH over the same length of time, say 2 to 3 years? And I think it's a worthwhile conversation to have. And I think give me the bat. You
every
get
time.
better ROI. There's more certainty. Anthony Santander has hit 30-something home runs basically every year he's been in the major leagues. He hit 44 last year. He's a switch hitter. He's got pop from both sides. You could throw him in left field. You could spell Nimmo a little bit. He's not a great defender, but you keep Nimmo healthier with the foot. I don't know if you guys agree, but like if that's the case, if that's how this offseason plays out, give me the 2 bats and let them cobble together the bullpen.
He's also less likely to get injured. I think it was more like, like an arm could go. And that's it. That he's done for the year. Where he might get hurt, but he'll be back eventually.
I take offense every single time, not even close. I love what Tanner Scott did last year. He was fantastic in all of his stops. And would he make sense for this team? Sure. Do you know that if that's what you're going to exactly get? You don't know because, again, you never know when it comes to relievers. I know Anthony Santander is a hitter. I would love to have that on my team. So
in that lineup?
And that, like, if you're adding that on top of a Pete or something like that, like, I would much rather have that and figure it out. Let David Stearns find his pitchers. Give me the offense. That's what every Met fan is always bitching about. They want to have more runs. They complain that this offense isn't good enough. It doesn't do enough. It's this, it's that. Now it's like you only got Juan Soto. It's not enough. And while I agree, it has to have more. I agree with that. So if we're going to choose to add to this team, add more bats, add more offense, support the pitching in that sense. Don't overpay for a reliever.
Can you imagine the lineup would look something like Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Alonso, Santander. And then we haven't even mentioned Brandon Nimmo, Francisco Alvarez. And like, then it becomes very easy to carry 2 guys who are defense first in center field with Taylor and Siri. And then whatever you get out of second base, I don't care if it's Jeff McNeil. I don't care if it's Acuna, if it's Mauricio, whoever wins that job, you want to bring back Jose Iglesias. You can carry those guys because there's no dead spots in the top of your lineup, which is how Atlanta is so successful. It's how Philly has been so successful, even though I think they're going to be a little older and take a step back. And it's how the Dodgers are so successful. You've got to build a lineup like that.
Yeah. Where do you guys think Soto's going to hit in the lineup?
I think he will. My gut is that he hits 2. I think they're going to go Lindor, Soto. That's my gut.
I think they put. I would put Lindor, Vientos, Soto. Soto's the better hitter out of Vientos, and Vientos will get way more fastballs hitting before him than after him.
I think it depends. I think it depends on who the other bats come into this lineup. I think that's going to dictate what happens. Because I too, like, right away, I really love the idea of Vientos batting 2, because I think it'd be great for his development, to maximize what he can do, which is dominate fastballs. But then I'm like, well, what's going to be behind Soto? We want to make sure we're getting the best out of him too. So I think that's going to, assuming Pete comes back, like we often say on the show, like, we don't complain that much when it comes to the lineup unless it really warrants it. So it's like, because the lineups change, what have you, whatever. But I think ultimately, I think Soto will end up batting 2, depending on how this overall offense comes together. But I wouldn't mind seeing times where Vientos is batting 2 and Soto's batting 3.
Yeah, I think Soto 3 because Soto takes walks. He'll walk at a time. Like, he will work a count and he'll walk at 2, which would be Vientos at 3. But I think if you put Vientos 2, he's going to be like, oh, if he gets on, then Soto's going to be up. I can't walk Soto now, so he's going to have to hit. So I think they're going to throw him more fastballs, which would be better for him. He crushes fastballs. So I think if the development for him would be better with 2, but who knows? Hey,
look, good problems to have.
Good problems to have. Yeah.
I do like this one from Ken. Ken's been very active in the comments saying, I like Taylor, great defense and clutch. He is that. And I think the Mets are in a better situation than they were last year. I thought Bader was a good signing. I thought he was going to have a good year if he stayed healthy. He did stay healthy. He did have a pretty good year, all things considered, for him. Okay. But I think this version of defensive platoon in center field is better because I think they complement each other, that's Siri and Taylor, better than Bader does. Because Siri's the kind of player, he's going to strike out a ton. But part of the reason why he does that is because he sells out to hit home runs and sells out for extra base hits. Plus, he gives you the speed element on the bases, which is something that Bader and Taylor both kind of don't do as much. So I think Taylor's a little bit steadier, Whereas with Siri, you're going to get a little bit more flash. And I think they're going to be complementary players in that way.
I think they're just waiting until Williams or Gilbert is ready. That's what I think they're going to do.
I think so. I think
I agree.
With Williams, Gilbert, and to a lesser extent, Acuna, I think they're trying to see if one of those guys can be a center fielder.
Yeah, they said Gilbert was more of a right fielder, but he played center in college, which I thought he was going to play. Stearns wants that D in center. He wants that good defense in center.
Yeah.
So it all depends.
You need it because look who you're flanked. Look who you're flanked by. You got Nimmo, and you got you got to have defense in center. You have to have it.
Yeah, you need that defense in center field.
You need it.
Two good comments here. Armand saying the Rays are changing their name to the Tampa Bay Ginger Rays.
Not bad.
This is a guy who the Mets were able to get their hands on today. Charlie talking about the bullpen, saying, is Austin Warren a candidate for the bullpen? Signed today from the Giants, who released him. He's on the 40-man. Don't know much about him. I have to be honest. I don't know a ton about him.
Yeah.
But to everything we were saying before, watch out for the guys you don't know a ton about, because
you'll see him at some point. Guaranteed, you'll see him at some point this year. We'll see what he provides.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. So you never know.
Have arms. You always have arms.
Yes.
And you always need arms in the bullpen. We're just about at 2 hours. This has been a great show. A lot of good stuff from not only us, obviously, Chris, thank you for joining us, but also
so much,
in the comments, a lot of people really, bringing the conversation to some different places. Anything that we didn't talk about, Chris, as far as the Mets are concerned, that you just want to, touch on, make sure that, hey, fans are looking forward to, or whatever the case may be. Just anything we didn't get to with regards to the Mets upcoming season or off season that we didn't get to.
If the Mets, this is to the Mets, if the Mets are going to suck, just suck right away. Do not suck me in. Do not do this to me. And because I was out, by May, I was like, this team's done. I'm done. I had my life was in order. I was writing more jokes, and then they started winning, and I never had any jokes. I'm done. So I'm literally about to go on stage watching in August, watching the game on my phone. They go, all right, come to the stage. I'm like, put the phone away. I got to go on stage and do comedy. So but it just depends. I'm going to live and die with this team anyway. I'm excited to see what the hell is going to happen. I'm excited. This is the first year in a while I'm pumped up. I think we could do damage. I don't think we're the best team in the National League by a margin. I think the Dodgers are just so much better. And, San Diego will regress, but they're okay. Atlanta scares me. They always scare me.
Yeah.
They'll be healthy this year too. They'll be
healthier. Yeah. And Philly, Philly's tough because
they're tough.
They're hit and miss guys. So hit and miss guys in the postseason can hit or miss. This year we got lucky; they missed. So it's so that team is also could be good, and they got a good rotation. They got a really good rotation. And Zach Wheeler, that hurts my soul.
Still to this day.
Want a funny story real quick? I used to date a girl that lives in Philly. She cut Zach Wheeler's wife's hair, and she hangs out with the Wheelers.
Yeah.
And I met Zach. I went to Game 6 of the NLCS versus the Diamondbacks. They got us tickets. I wore a Met shirt underneath. I'm not crazy, but I wore it underneath my as a thing. But I met Wheeler. I wanted to be come home. Just come home. Come back to us.
We love you. Please.
We love you. Please come back.
Armand saying
so much better now.
Warren in 6 games last year in the majors, 1.69 ERA with a 0.3 WAR. Obviously, very, very, very small sample size, but whatever. Ibby, anything we didn't get to that you want to get to?
Nothing in particular. I know Carlos had sent us a message earlier, and I'll just say this real quick because I put out a tweet about it. I know Mike Vaccaro put out an article this week about Carlos Beltran, and I responded to it. And obviously, I don't have the Post Plus because I would never pay for a rag like that. But I do respect Mike. I think he's one of the better writers over the last handful of years that I enjoy what he does. And he was just talking about Carlos Beltran and saying how, he's very curious in the light of Mets fans. And I just wanted to say that I think that Carlos Beltran deserves a lot more respect. Anyone who watches the show knows how much I love the guy and what he provided for this team. And to this point, I can still say this, at least right now, until Juan Soto suits up and actually plays a game. But Carlos Beltran is, to this point, the greatest signing that the Mets have had, that we've seen the results from what he's provided. So I think that, Mets fans need to just calm down a little bit when it comes to the hate. His entire career does not come down to one at-bat, even though it did hurt. I was in the building that night. It was a fantastic curveball. I was in the building that night. We all left like zombies. It was a nightmare, but I still love Carlos Beltran. The number 15 should be retired. He's going to go into the Hall eventually as a New York Met, in my opinion. So the overall piece was fine, but I really think that Mets fans need to allow that 06 end to go out of their minds and realize that they had one of the greatest center fielders play for their team.
Yeah, the one thing I have with Beltran, I'm happy Lindor had the year he had because he was going that Beltran route.
Yeah.
Or like he wasn't doing great. And fans were hating on him. And I was like, he's so much better than what you guys are giving him credit for. And same with Beltran, like he was so much better than the only Beltran's not because he never got back to the playoffs.
Right.
That people forget that the guy was batting like nearly 400 in those playoffs before that at bat. It's like he was carrying us that entire year. 40 home runs.
My one argument with that at bat was you should have swung with that first pitch fastball.
Absolutely.
Yes. Was the pitch to hit, and he threw you two nasty curveball. The curveball he struck out, I was like, that was the nastiest pitch I've ever seen. That was nasty.
There's not a person. I have said this. I will say it again. For everybody who critiques whether you're a former professional baseball player, you played in high school, played little league, whatever, people sitting in the stands, doesn't matter. You play softball. There's not a person in the world that was hitting that curveball.
Nobody was.
So nasty.
Nobody was filthy. I agree with you. Going in, knowing that the curveball's his bread and butter, don't let him sneak a fastball by you first pitch. That would be the only critique, but that does not undo the guy's entire career. Before Soto, he was the most important signing in franchise history. He was franchise altering. The difference is Soto is younger, and the difference is, Soto takes this money to turn down the Yankees. I know that Beltran said he would go to the Yankees if they would have matched the deal, but to me, that doesn't sour it. He came here. He was a great Met. He was an underappreciated Met. He deserves to go into the Hall of Fame as a Met, and eventually 15 should be retired. I agree with all of that. It's just, it is tricky. That first pitch fastball was the one to hit.
I've analyzed that at bat so many times in my life. And in my head, I go, I know he was thinking Wainwright's going to throw me a first pitch curveball to get me over because the righty lefty is a bad for usually lefty to hit that. He's like, he's going to throw me that first pitch curveball to get me over. And when he threw him a fastball, he lost it because he had no idea what was coming. He got shook. That bugs me.
Ken's saying Soto isn't the 5-tool player that Beltran was. That's true, but Beltran is not nearly the hitter that Soto is, if you want to just keep it fair. Anyway, guys, this has been absolutely fantastic.
Great
2
show.
hours. Great. Chris, thank you for giving us 2 hours of your time. It was great. We'd love to have you
come on. Let me know. I love this.
Fantastic.
All right. I was going to put you on the spot and say we'd love to have you back on. So I'm happy that you already offered.
I need to talk to Mets, and I can't talk to my dog, and my mom doesn't care anymore. So.
There's my cat up behind us.
Fair enough.
I almost made the entire show without my cat making an appearance. Chris, one more time, where can folks find you?
Just at Chris Scopo on all social media. If you want to come to a show, just DM me. I'll let you know where I'm at.
Perfect. Thank you for doing the show.
Thank you so much, man.
That's Chris Scopo. Gave us 2 hours of his time. Great comedian in New York, tri-state area. Find him touring. He's going to be in Mohegan Sun this weekend. Is that this weekend?
Yeah, you can find me on stage or losing the money I'm making this weekend at the table.
If you see him, he didn't ask me to say this. If you see Chris at the casino before or after the show, get him a drink because he's going to be.
Well, it depends how many chips I have in front of me. If I have a lot of chips, come talk to me. If I don't have a lot of chips, don't talk to me.
Anyway, guys, this has been Til Mets Do Us Part. We're live every single Wednesday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. Usually go for an hour and a half, 2 hours or so. A lot of great stuff to talk about here with regards to the New York Mets in the offseason. I think we're now 38 days away from Mets playing a spring training game or whatever. It's getting close. They still have work to do. They will do that work. We'll see what this team looks like when we're here with you next week. If you missed any of the show, you can watch it on our YouTube channel as soon as we're done with the broadcast here. It will live forever on that space, or you could wait a little bit longer later on tonight. By tomorrow morning, definitely you can check out the audio version of this show on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, all of those places and more. John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez. Shout out to the Brella Sports Network for making it possible. Thank you once again to Chris Scopo, our guest this week. This is Til Mets Do Us Part. We will see you next week.